I never told my daughter about the basement beneath my shop. I never told her that the dusty old floorboards covered a steel-reinforced door, or that the things I kept down there were worth more than the entire city block. I thought I was protecting her, but greed has a way of sniffing out gold even through 3 feet of concrete. Last night my assistant Sasha called me. She was crying. "Mr. Graves," she whispered, "do not come back. The sensors are screaming. They are in the vault." I pulled my truck over and opened the security app on my phone. My heart stopped. On camera number 4, I saw my daughter Nia holding a diamond-tipped drill while her boyfriend Caleb kicked my life's work with his muddy boots. I watched them break the seal. I watched them laugh. And then I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of calling the police, I turned off the silent alarm. I opened the gates. "You want to see what is down there, Nia? Go ahead." But getting in is the easy part. Getting out is a different story. Before I tell you what they found in the dark, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had someone you love betray you for money. I read every single comment. My name is Winston Graves. I am 71 years old. For 40 years, I have been the owner of The Timekeeper, a shop that restores antique mechanical toys and clocks. People see a bent old man with grease under his fingernails and they think I am poor. They see my faded work shirt and my calloused hands, and they think I scrape by fixing cuckoo clocks for tourists. They do not know about the patents. They do not know that the Smithsonian calls me when they have an automaton from the 18th century that refuses to sing. They do not know that the restoration of a single Jacquet Droz Rider doll pays for this entire building. I kept it quiet. I kept it simple. I wanted Nia to learn the value of hard work, not the entitlement of inheritance. Evidently, I failed. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The sky was that bruised purple color that promises a storm. I was across town at a salvage yard looking for a specific brass gear for a 1920s music box. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Sasha. Sasha is 24, a brilliant engineering student who works for me part-time. She has more respect for these machines in her pinky finger than my daughter has in her whole body. "Winston," she said, and I could hear the terror in her voice. "The basement sensors. Zone 4. Someone is drilling the lock." I froze. Zone 4. That is the heavy steel door behind the false wall in the storage room. No one knows about that door, not even Sasha. "Are you in the shop, Sasha?" I asked, my voice calm. "No," she said. "I am at the library monitoring the feed remotely like you taught me. Winston the heat signature. There are 2 of them." "Stay there, Sasha," I said. "Do not call the cops yet. Let me see." I hung up and opened the app. The video feed loaded. It was high definition, crisp and clear in the low light of the basement. I saw them. Caleb Thorne was holding a commercial-grade diamond drill, pressing it against the lock mechanism of my sanctuary. Caleb is 35 years old. He calls himself an antique dealer, but he is nothing but a fence for stolen goods. He wears suits that are too shiny and smiles that are too wide. He has been dating Nia for 6 months. I knew he was a snake the moment he shook my hand. His palms were soft. He had never worked a day in his life. And standing next to him holding the flashlight was Nia. My Nia. My little girl who used to sit on my workbench and watch me polish gears. She is 28 now. She looked tired. She looked hungry. But not hungry for food. Hungry for the lifestyle Caleb promised her. He pushed the drill harder. The sound must have been deafening in that small space, but on my phone it was silent. I saw his lips moving. I zoomed in. I have spent a lifetime reading the movements of tiny gears, so reading lips was easy. "Hurry up, babe," Caleb was saying. "The old man will be back in an hour." "I can't believe we are doing this," Nia replied. Her face was pale in the flashlight beam. "If he finds out, he will kill us." "He won't do anything." Caleb laughed. "He is a weak old man, Nia. Look at this lock. He is hiding something huge. You said he is broke, right? You said he makes pennies fixing toys." "That is what he tells me," Nia said. She shifted her weight, looking nervously at the stairs. "He drives that beat-up truck. He wears those rags. He is so embarrassing, Caleb." Caleb stopped drilling for a second. He turned to her and grinned. "That is the oldest trick in the book, babe. The miser, the dragon sitting on his gold. He has been holding out on you. He has a fortune down here, and he lets you drive that piece of junk Honda while he counts his money in the dark. He doesn't love you, Nia. He loves his secrets. I felt a physical pain in my chest like a mainspring snapping. I have paid for her car. I paid for her college, which she dropped out of. I paid for her apartment, which she trashed. I have never said no to her needs, only to her wants. Nia looked at the door. Her expression hardened. The guilt vanished, replaced by a cold resentment that mirrored her mother's worst days. "You are right," she said. "That old man. He cares more about his iron dolls than he cares about his own daughter." "Break it open, Caleb. I want what is mine. What is hers?" I sat in my truck and gripped the steering wheel. My hands are old. They have arthritis. They have scars from slips with chisels and screwdrivers. Every dollar I have was earned with a drop of blood or a drop of sweat. And she thought it was hers simply because she was born. The drill punched through. Caleb kicked the door. It swung open on silent, well-oiled hinges. They stepped inside. I switched the camera view to the interior of the vault. They stopped dead in their tracks. The vault is not just a storage room. It is a museum. Rows of glass cases lined the walls. Inside them were the automata, the mechanical wonders, the silver swan, the draftsman, the singing bird pistols, gold, silver, enamel, rubies, things that kings and queens had played with centuries ago. Caleb dropped the drill. It clattered on the concrete floor. "Holy Mother of God," he whispered. He walked over to a shelf. He picked up a Faberge egg. It wasn't real Faberge, but it was a replica I made that was worth $50,000. "Nia, look at this," he said, his voice trembling with greed. "This is it. This is the jackpot. We are rich, babe. We are filthy rich." Nia walked in slowly. She looked around. She didn't look at the beauty of the mechanics. She didn't look at the thousands of hours of labor it took to restore these pieces. She looked at them like they were lottery tickets. "Why didn't he tell me?" she whispered. Her voice was shaking with rage. "We could have lived in a mansion. I could have been someone. He hid this from me. He let me struggle while he sat on this." She walked over to a display table in the center of the room. On it sat a single box made of black ebony wood. It was inlaid with pearl and gold wire. It was the heart of the timekeeper. My masterpiece. It wasn't an antique I restored. It was something I built. It took me 10 years. Caleb saw her looking at it. He rushed over. "What is that?" he asked. "I don't know," Nia said, reaching out to touch it. "He told me once he was working on something special. He said it was the only thing he would never sell." Caleb grabbed it. His greedy hands smeared oil from the drill onto the polished wood. "If he won't sell it," he said, grinning, "then it must be the most expensive thing in here." He tried to open it. It was locked, not with a key, but with a puzzle mechanism, a series of sliding panels and dials. "We take it all," Caleb said. "Grab the bags. We start with the gold ones. We strip this place clean, Nia. By the time he gets back, we will be halfway to Mexico." I watched them. I watched the man who called me weak. I watched the daughter who called me embarrassing. I could have called the police. I could have had them arrested right there. But the police would just charge them with breaking and entering. They would get a lawyer. Caleb would claim he was confused. Nia would cry and say it was a misunderstanding. They would be out on bail in 24 hours. And they would come back. They always come back. No, this required a different kind of correction. My shop is not just a building. It is a machine. A giant, intricate machine that I built myself. And the basement is the engine room. I looked at the app on my phone. There was a button labeled Lockdown Protocol. I installed it 5 years ago after a riot down the street. It was meant to protect the collection from looters. It activates the steel shutters on the windows. It engages the magnetic locks on the doors, and it cuts the ventilation to preserve the artifacts in a vacuum seal if necessary. I didn't press lockdown, not yet. I pressed the button marked Alarm Override. Usually if that vault door opens without my biometrics, a silent alarm goes straight to the precinct. I disabled it. I saw the green light on the control panel in the video feed turn off. Entering the trap was free. I wanted them to feel safe. I wanted them to feel successful. I wanted them to touch the gold and believe it was theirs. Caleb was stuffing a golden carriage into a duffel bag. Nia was sweeping a shelf of silver clock parts into her purse. I started the engine of my truck. I wasn't rushing. I drove the speed limit. Sasha texted me again. "Winston, what are you doing?" "The police." I texted back 2 words. "Not yet." I drove through the rain. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm. Slap, 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 like a metronome. I thought about Nia when she was 5. She broke a music box I was fixing. She cried. I didn't scold her. I sat her down and we fixed it together. I taught her that when you break something, you have to understand how it works to put it back together. She had forgotten that lesson. She thought she could just smash and grab. I pulled up a block away from the shop. I parked in the shadows. I could see the back entrance. The door was slightly ajar where they had jimmied the outer lock. I opened my phone again. They were still down there. They were arguing now. "This is too heavy," Nia complained. She was trying to lift a bronze statue of Atlas. "Shut up and lift!" Caleb snapped. "You want the life or not? You want to go back to waiting tables. He doesn't love you, Nia." The words echoed in my head. I looked at the button on my screen. Remote access, vault door. I pressed close. On the screen I saw the heavy steel door behind them start to move. It didn't slam. It glided. Precision engineering is silent. Caleb was busy trying to pry a gemstone out of a clock face. Nia was looking at the ebony box. Neither of them noticed the door swinging shut until the magnetic locks engaged with a heavy, distinct thud. Caleb spun around. What was that? He ran to the door. He pushed it. It didn't budge. He kicked it. Nothing. Nia dropped the box. "Dad," she whispered. I watched them on the tiny screen. The panic setting in. The realization that they weren't the hunters anymore. They were the rats. I turned off the truck. I walked through the rain to the back door of my shop. I stepped inside. The air smelled of oil and old wood. My smell. I didn't go down to the basement. I didn't yell. I walked to my workbench. I picked up a small screwdriver. I sat down and picked up the music box I had been working on earlier. I wound it up. It played a soft, tinkering tune. Down below me, through 3 feet of concrete and steel, my daughter and her boyfriend were screaming. They were pounding on the door. I couldn't hear them. The soundproofing in the vault is excellent. I took a sip of my cold coffee. "Welcome to the timekeeper," I whispered to the empty room. I looked at the monitor. Caleb was throwing himself against the steel. Nia was sliding down the wall, sobbing. "You wanted to know what I was hiding, Nia. You wanted to know the value of my work. Well, now you have a front row seat." I picked up the phone and typed a message to my lawyer. "Prepare the papers, the eviction, and the transfer of assets, tonight." Then I sat back and watched. The night was young. And in the basement, time moves very slowly when you are waiting for a judgment that isn't coming. The drive back to the shop was a blur of neon lights and rain-streaked glass. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from a cold, heavy realization. I had raised a stranger. I pulled my truck into the alley behind the building, the engine sputtering before dying into silence. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My hands were shaking. These hands had restored clocks for kings and queens. They had fixed mechanisms so small you needed a microscope to see the gears. But they could not fix the broken thing that was my family. I got out of the truck. The rain soaked my shirt, instantly chilling me to the bone. I walked up the back stairs to the apartment above the shop. The door was unlocked. Of course it was. They wanted me to come in. They were waiting for me. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of old paper and tea that usually filled my home. It was the smell of cheap cologne and expensive pizza, Caleb's cologne. They were sitting in the living room. Nia was on the sofa, her feet tucked under her, drinking a glass of my best scotch. Caleb was sitting in my armchair, his legs spread wide, claiming the space like a conquering warlord. And there, sitting on the coffee table between the pizza box and the remote control, was the ebony box, the heart of the timekeeper. I stopped in the doorway, dripping wet water pooling around my work boots. I expected them to look guilty. I expected them to jump up and try to hide the evidence, but they didn't move. Caleb took a bite of pizza, chewing slowly, looking me right in the eye. He smiled. It was a smile that showed too many teeth. "Hey, Pops," he said, his mouth full. "You are home early. We were just talking about you." I looked at Nia, my daughter, the girl I had carried on my shoulders. She wouldn't meet my gaze. She was staring into her glass, swirling the amber liquid around and around. "What are you doing, Nia?" I asked, my voice low. "I saw you in the basement. I saw you break the seal." Nia finally looked up. Her eyes were hard, glassy. She looked like someone who had rehearsed a speech 1,000 times and was terrified she would forget the lines. "We had to, Dad," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hand was trembling. We had to see for ourselves. You have been lying to me for years. You said you were broke. You said the business was failing. But down there, Dad, there is a fortune down there. I walked into the room. I felt heavy like my bones were made of lead. That is not a fortune, Nia, I said, pointing to the box. That is history. That is my life's work. It does not belong to you. It belongs to the family, Caleb interjected, wiping his greasy hands on his jeans. And since you are clearly not in your right mind anymore, someone has to step up and manage the assets. I turned to him. My right mind. Caleb reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and tossed it onto the table next to the stolen box. Read it, old man, he said. I picked it up. It was a medical document, a psychiatric evaluation. I scanned the lines. Patient exhibits signs of early onset dementia, paranoia, hoarding behavior, unable to manage financial affairs, recommended immediate power of attorney transfer. I looked at the signature at the bottom. Dr. Eris Thorne. I froze. Thorne. I looked at Caleb. My uncle is a very respected psychiatrist, Caleb said, grinning. He reviewed your case file. The hoarding, the seclusion, the obsession with toys. It is a textbook case, Pops. You are losing your marbles. I looked at Nia. Is this what that lunch was about last week? I remembered it now. Nia had taken me to lunch. She said she wanted to reconnect. She brought a man with her, introduced him as a friend from college. He asked me questions about my memory, about my work. I thought he was just making conversation. I didn't know I was being auditioned for an asylum. Nia stood up. She walked over to me, but she didn't hug me. She stood with her arms crossed, a defensive wall between us. It is for your own good, Dad, she said. You are living like a hermit. You are sitting on millions of dollars of inventory and you won't sell a dime. That is not normal. That is sickness. Caleb is going to help us. He knows people. He can liquidate the collection and get you the care you need. We can put you in a nice home. One with a view. A nice home. A nursing home. They were going to sell my life's work and use the money to lock me away. I crumpled the paper in my fist. This is fraud, I said. You cannot do this. Watch us. Caleb laughed. He stood up and walked over to the ebony box. He ran his hand over the pearl inlay. You know the funny thing, Caleb said. We don't even need to sell the whole collection yet. This little beauty right here should cover our startup costs. He reached for the latch. Don't touch that, I warned, stepping forward. You don't know what is inside. It is not just a toy, Caleb. It is a mechanism. Caleb ignored me. He fiddled with the dials. Nia must have told him the combination, or maybe he just guessed it was her birthday. He clicked the last dial into place. The lid popped open with a soft hiss of escaping air. Caleb looked inside. His eyes went wide. His mouth fell open. Even Nia gasped. Inside the box, resting on a bed of black velvet, was a bird. But it wasn't a real bird. It was a creature of pure light. Every feather was individually carved from 18-karat gold. Its eyes were two flawless rubies that caught the lamplight and seemed to burn. Its beak was a shard of black diamond. It was the size of a robin, but it carried the weight of a crown. I had spent 5 years making it. I had learned the technique from a manuscript written by a Swiss watchmaker in 1780. It contained over 400 moving parts. It was priceless. Caleb reached in and lifted it out. He held it up to the light. 2 million, he whispered. Easy, maybe 3 in Dubai. He looked at Nia. Babe, look at this. We are rich. We are finally getting what we deserve. He wasn't looking at the artistry. He wasn't wondering how the wings folded or how the beak opened. He was only seeing zeros in a bank account. Put it back, I said. My voice was shaking now. Not from fear, but from a dangerous cocktail of rage and sorrow. That bird wasn't just gold. Inside its chest, hidden beneath the mainspring, was the master key to the entire basement ventilation system. It was the fail-safe. If someone wound it incorrectly, it triggered the final lockdown. It was the trigger for the trap I had designed for thieves. Caleb turned to me. He held the bird like a hostage. Or what old man, he sneered. What are you going to do? Call the cops. Show them the paper that says you are crazy. Show them the basement you hid from the IRS. He took a step toward me. He was 35 years old, 6 feet tall, and built like a linebacker. I was 71 with a bad hip. I am taking this, Caleb said. And tomorrow, I am bringing a truck for the rest. I lunged. It was instinct. I couldn't let him take it out of the house. I reached for the bird, my fingers brushing against the cold gold of its wing. Caleb didn't punch me. He didn't have to. He just laughed and shoved me. He placed his hand flat on my chest and pushed, hard. I stumbled back. My boot caught on the edge of the rug. I flailed my arms trying to find balance, but gravity is a cruel mistress to the old. I hit the floor hard. My hip slammed against the hardwood. Pain exploded up my spine, white-hot and blinding. I gasped for air, lying there in the wet clothes, staring up at the water-stained ceiling. Dad, Nia screamed. She ran forward, but Caleb grabbed her arm. "Leave him," he barked. "He is fine. He is just being dramatic." Nia looked at me. She looked at my twisted leg. She looked at the pain etched on my face. For a second, I saw a flicker of the little girl who used to cry when I hurt my finger, but then she looked at the golden bird in Caleb's hand. The ruby eyes seemed to hypnotize her. She stopped. She straightened up. She smoothed her shirt. "Stay down, Dad," she said. Her voice was cold, colder than the rain outside. "You are hurt," she said, reciting the script she had created in her head to justify her betrayal. "You are old, and you are hurt, and you can't manage this anymore. Just rest." She looked at Caleb. Her eyes were shining with a toxic mix of fear and greed. "Take the box," she told him. "Put the bird back in the box. We will put it in the safe tonight." Caleb smirked. He placed the bird back into its velvet nest and snapped the lid shut. He patted the box like a pet. "Smart girl," he said. He walked over to where I lay. He stood over me, looking down like I was a piece of broken furniture that needed to be hauled to the curb. "Hear that, Pops," he said. "You are retired. Officially." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. My keys. He must have taken the spare set from the hook by the door. "I am going to change the locks in the morning," Caleb said, jingling them in my face. "Don't try to come downstairs. Don't try to open the shop. This is my operation now. The timekeeper has a new management." He turned and walked back to the sofa, sitting down and putting his feet up on the table right next to the stolen treasure. Nia didn't look at me again. She went to the kitchen and poured herself another drink. I lay there on the floor, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. My hip was throbbing a dull ache that synced with the beating of my heart. I closed my eyes. They thought they had won. They thought the gold bird was the prize. They didn't know what they were holding. They didn't know that by taking that box, they had just started a countdown. Caleb Van Cott Sai Qui Trin. If he winds it the wrong way. I let out a slow, shaky breath. "Go ahead, Caleb," I thought. "Be the manager. Take charge." I dragged myself up. It took every ounce of strength I had. I pulled myself to my knees, then to my feet, using the wall for support. "Where are you going?" Caleb asked, not even looking up from the TV. "To bed," I whispered. I limped down the hall to my bedroom. I closed the door and locked it. I didn't go to bed. I went to my desk. I pulled out my tablet. I opened the control app. System status compromised. Master key removed from containment. I typed in a command code. It wasn't a code to lock them out. It was a code to let them in deeper. Disable Zone 4 motion sensors. Disable internal silent alarms. I sat back in my chair. My hip was on fire, but my mind was ice cold. Nia told me to rest. She told me Caleb was in charge. Fine. I would rest. I would sit right here and watch. Because when you hand a monkey a hand grenade, you don't need to pull the pin. You just have to wait for him to get curious. And Caleb Thorne was the most curious monkey I had ever met. The morning sun hit the pavement on 4th Street, but it brought no warmth to my skin. I stood in front of the heavy oak door of the timekeeper, the shop I had bought 40 years ago with money I saved from fixing watches in a garage. I put my key in the lock. It was a brass key worn smooth by decades of use. I knew the feel of it like I knew the feel of my own hand. But this morning it refused to turn. I jiggled it. I pulled it back a fraction of an inch. Nothing. The tumblers were frozen. I stepped back and looked up. The sign above the door was still there. The Timekeeper. Established 1984. But something had changed. In the window, the display I had carefully arranged last week was gone. The antique French automata, the dancing bears, the singing nightingales were gone. In their place was a hand-painted sign that read, "Under new management, grand reopening sale." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I pounded on the door. "Open up," I shouted. "Open this door." A police cruiser pulled up to the curb. I felt a surge of relief. Finally, I waved them down. "Officer," I said, limping toward them. "I need help. Someone has changed the locks on my business. I am being locked out of my own property." 2 officers stepped out. One was young, looking like he had just graduated from the academy. The other was older, with tired eyes. "Are you Winston Graves?" the older officer asked, looking at a clipboard. "Yes," I said, straightening my back. "I am the owner. My daughter and her boyfriend are inside. They assaulted me last night. They stole a valuable artifact, and now they are squatting in my shop." The officer didn't reach for his handcuffs. He didn't reach for his radio. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Mr. Graves," he said, his voice condescendingly gentle, like he was talking to a confused child. "We have a copy of the emergency guardianship order filed this morning by your daughter, Nia Graves." I stared at him. Guardianship. "It says here," the officer continued, tapping the paper, "that you have been diagnosed with advanced cognitive decline and paranoia. Your daughter has been granted temporary power of attorney over your assets, including this business, to ensure your safety and financial stability." "That is a lie," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "That diagnosis is a forgery. The doctor is the boyfriend's uncle. This is a setup, officer. You have to listen to me." The officer shook his head. "Sir, this is a civil matter now. If you want to contest the guardianship, you need to go to family court. But right now you are causing a disturbance. You cannot be here." "But it is my shop," I whispered. "Not anymore," the young officer said. "Not until a judge says otherwise. Your daughter has requested you be removed from the premises. She says you are becoming aggressive." Aggressive. I was standing there, leaning on a cane, 71 years old, shivering in the morning chill. Just then, the door opened. The bell above it chimed a cheerful sound that felt like a mockery. Caleb stepped out. He was wearing one of my vintage waistcoats over his t-shirt, looking like a clown mocking a gentleman. He held a coffee cup in one hand and a broom in the other. "Officers," he said, flashing that blinding fake smile. "Is everything okay? Is he bothering you?" "We were just explaining the situation, Mr. Thorne," the older officer said. "Mr. Graves was just leaving." Caleb looked at me. His eyes were dancing with malice. "Take your time, Pops," he said. "Go get some rest. We have a lot of cleaning up to do in here. This place is a hoarder's paradise." He turned and banged the broom against the glass of the display window. "Hey, Nia," he shouted. "Bring out the trash." My daughter stepped into the window display. She wasn't looking at me. She was carrying a box. I recognized the box. It contained parts from a 19th century steam engine toy I was restoring. It wasn't trash, it was history. She dumped the box into a large black garbage bag. I heard the sound of brass gears hitting the floor. I heard the snap of delicate springs. "Nia, no," I shouted, lunging forward. The young officer grabbed my arm. "Sir, back away." I watched helpless as Caleb grabbed a tin soldier from the shelf. It was a rare piece from the Civil War era worth $3,000. He looked at it, laughed, and tossed it over his shoulder into the trash bin like it was a candy wrapper. "It is all junk," he yelled through the glass. "We are making room for the real inventory. We are going to sell luxury watches here, old man, not broken dolls." He picked up a clock mechanism. He held it high, then he dropped it. Smash! The glass face shattered. I felt like he had dropped my heart. "Sir," the officer said, his hand tightening on my arm. "You need to leave. Now. Or we will have to take you in for disorderly conduct." I looked at Nia. She was standing amidst the wreckage of my life, avoiding my gaze. She knew what those things meant to me. She knew that every gear represented hours of my life, and she was letting him destroy them. I pulled my arm away from the officer. I smoothed my jacket. I gripped my cane until my knuckles turned white. "I am leaving," I said. I turned my back on the timekeeper. I didn't look back at Caleb's smug face. I walked down the street, the sound of breaking glass echoing in my ears. I walked until my bad leg gave out and I had to sit on a bus stop bench. I checked my pockets. I had my wallet, my phone, and the clothes on my back. That was it. 40 years of labor gone in a morning. I took out my phone. I dialed a number. Sasha answered on the first ring. "Winston," she cried. "Where are you?" I drove by the shop. The police were there. I saw Caleb putting a banner up. "Oh my God, Winston, did they really take it?" "Yes, Sasha," I said, my voice eerily calm. "They took the building." "What do we do?" she asked. I called the lawyer, but he said the medical report is a strong piece of evidence. It could take weeks to get a hearing. By then, they will have sold everything. Not everything, I said. Winston, what about the basement? She whispered. Did they get in? They are in the first room, I said, the display room, and the box, Sasha asked. The heart. Did they find it? Yes, I said. Caleb has it. Silence on the line. Then a gasp. Winston, if they have the bird, if they figure out how to wind it, it is worth millions. They win. No, Sasha, I said, looking at the gray sky. Listen to me very carefully. You are an engineer. Think about the design. Think about why I built that bird. I don't understand. It is not just an automaton, Sasha. It is a regulator. It is the master key for the ventilation and locking system of the lower levels. But if they sell it, they can't sell it if it doesn't work, I said. And to make it work, they have to wind it. But Sasha, that bird has a mechanism 0. Mechanism 0, she repeated. It is a fail-safe, I explained, a trap for the greedy. A normal winding key turns clockwise, but the gold bird, if you turn it clockwise past 3 clicks, it engages a shear pin. It snaps the mainspring. The bird won't sing. It will die. And then what happens? Sasha asked. Then the system registers a catastrophic failure, I said. It interprets it as a forced entry attempt. It engages the secondary lockdown. You mean? I mean, if they try to use that bird to get rich, they are going to trigger a tomb, I said. Winston, Sasha whispered. Did you tell them? No. But they wanted the gold, Sasha. Let them handle the gold. Now I need you to do something for me. I need you to go to my cloud server, access the backup surveillance nodes. But the shop cameras are offline, she said. Caleb cut the wires. I saw him. He cut the visible wires, I said, allowing a small, grim smile to touch my lips. He cut the dummy cameras I put up for show. He doesn't know about the pinhole lenses in the clock faces. He doesn't know about the sensors in the floorboards. I am not blind, Sasha. I never was. I see, she said. Her voice was steady now. Where are you going? The Starlight Motel, I said. It is that flea bag place on the edge of town. Room 12. Bring my laptop and bring coffee. We have a long night ahead of us. I hung up. I stood up and hailed a cab. The Starlight Motel was a place for people who had hit rock bottom. It smelled of stale cigarettes and despair. The carpet was sticky and the walls were thin. I checked in paying cash. The clerk didn't look at me. He just slid a key across the counter. I walked into the small room. I sat on the sagging bed. I put my cane against the wall. I closed my eyes and visualized my shop. I visualized Caleb strutting around, moving my benches, throwing away my tools. I visualized Naya looking at the price tags, trying to calculate her inheritance. They thought they had exiled me. They thought they had cast the old king out of his castle. But they forgot one thing. A clockmaker doesn't need to be inside the clock to control the time. He just needs to set the alarm. I waited. An hour later, there was a knock on the door. It was Sasha. She was carrying a heavy backpack and 4 large coffees. She set up the laptop on the rickety desk. She typed in the encryption keys. The screen flickered to life, and there they were. The feed was grainy, but I could see everything. I saw Caleb in my office drinking my scotch. I saw Nia in the showroom sticking price stickers on my beloved antiques. $5,000 for the singing horse, she muttered. That is too low. Make it 10. I watched them. I watched them defile my sanctuary. Sasha sat next to me. He is holding the bird, she said, pointing at the screen. Caleb was sitting at my desk holding the ebony box. He had the winding key in his hand. He is going to do it, she whispered. I leaned forward. Go ahead, Caleb, I murmured. Wind it. You think it is a toy. You think it is just gold and gears. I watched his hand turn the key. Click. 1. Click. 2. Click. 3. He kept turning. He was greedy. He wanted it to be fully charged. He wanted it to be perfect for the buyer. Click. 4. Snap. It was faint, but the microphone picked it up. A sharp metallic sound, like a bone breaking. Caleb froze. He turned the key again. It spun loosely. No resistance. He broke it, Sasha whispered. I sat back in my chair. He didn't just break it, I said, taking a sip of the bitter motel coffee. He just armed the system. On the screen, Caleb was shaking the bird. He held it up to his ear. He banged it against the desk. Work, damn you, he shouted. He threw the golden bird back into the box. Stupid old junk, he yelled. He didn't know. He didn't know that deep in the basement beneath his feet, hydraulic locks were silently engaging. He didn't know that the air vents were slowly closing. He thought he had broken a toy. In reality, he had just locked the gates of hell from the inside. I looked at Sasha. "Now we wait," I said. "Greed is a patient hunter, but I am patienter." I watched the screen. My exile had begun, but so had their nightmare. The coffee in the styrofoam cup had gone cold hours ago, but I didn't get up to refill it. My eyes were glued to the laptop screen sitting on the chipped laminate desk of the Starlight Motel. It was 2 a.m. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, but inside my headphones, the audio feed from the shop was crystal clear. I watched as my daughter and her boyfriend prepared to sell my soul. They had turned my workshop into a showroom. My tools were swept onto the floor. My magnifying lamps were pushed aside. In the center of the bench sat the ebony box. Caleb was pacing back and forth. He was wearing one of my vintage silk ties over his t-shirt, looking like a child playing dress-up. Nia was sitting on a stool, chewing her fingernail. She looked nervous. "Good. She should be." "He is late," Caleb muttered, checking his watch. "You said he would be here at 2. He is coming," Nia said. "Victor is the best fence in the city, Caleb. He doesn't rush." I leaned forward. Victor. I knew that name. He wasn't just a fence. He was a shark. A high-end broker for stolen antiquities who didn't deal in anything worth less than 6 figures. If they had called Victor, they were swimming in waters far too deep for them. A moment later, the back door buzzer sounded. Caleb jumped. He smoothed his hair and put on his salesman's smile. "Showtime, babe," he said. "Let's get rich." He opened the door. A man walked in. He was short, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit carrying a metal briefcase. He didn't look at Caleb. He didn't look at Nia. His eyes scanned the room, assessing the security, the exits, and the value in a single sweep. "Mr. Thorne, I presume," the man said. His voice was like dry leaves scraping on pavement. "Call me Caleb, and this is my partner Nia." Victor ignored the introduction. He walked straight to the workbench. He put on a pair of white cotton gloves. "Show me," he said. Caleb rushed to the box. He fumbled with the latch. His hands were shaking. Greed does that to amateurs. It makes them clumsy. He opened the lid. Even through the grainy camera feed, I saw Victor's posture change. He leaned in. He adjusted a jeweler's loop over his eye. For a long time there was silence. The only sound was Victor's breathing and the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. He lifted the golden bird out of its nest. He held it up to the light. He examined the hinges of the wings. He looked at the ruby eyes. He looked at the diamond beak. "It is exquisite," Victor whispered. "The craftsmanship is 18th century Swiss, Jacques Dreux style. But the materials are modern. This is a restoration or a master forgery." "It is an original," Caleb lied quickly. "My girlfriend's father kept it hidden for 50 years. It belonged to a czar." I snorted in my motel room. A czar. The boy couldn't tell a czar from a sardine. Victor set the bird down gently on the velvet. He took off his loop. "I don't care about the czar," he said. "I care about the market. The gold weight alone is substantial. The gems are flawless. But the value lies in the complication." He looked at Caleb. "Does it sing?" Caleb blinked. "Of course it sings. It is a music box." "Show me," Victor said. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. This was it, the moment of truth. I had designed the winding mechanism with a specific torque ratio. A standard key requires gentle pressure. You have to feel the springs engage. You have to listen to the clicks. 1, 2, 3, stop. But Caleb didn't know the machine. He only knew the force. He picked up the brass key. He inserted it into the small hole under the bird's right wing. I held my breath. $3 million, Victor said calmly. Caleb froze. His eyes bulged. $3 million. Cash. Victor added, tapping his briefcase. "Tonight, if it works, $3 million. It was enough money to disappear. It was enough money to buy the Italian villa Nia always talked about. It was enough to erase me from their lives forever. All he had to do was turn the key." Caleb grinned. He looked at Nia. "We made it, babe," he said. He turned the key. Click. That was 1. I watched his hand. He was gripping the key too hard. He was white-knuckling it. He wasn't winding a delicate instrument. He was cranking a lawnmower. Click. That was 2. Easy, boy, I whispered to the screen. Don't force it. The bird's head turned slightly. The beak opened. A tiny mechanical chirp escaped. See? Caleb said triumphantly. It works, fully Victor commanded. I need to see the wings extend. I need the full aria. Caleb nodded. He turned the key again. Click. 3. That was the limit. The mainspring was fully compressed. The tension was at its peak. Any clockmaker would feel the resistance wall. They would feel the metal pushing back saying enough. But Caleb didn't feel resistance. He felt $3 million. He felt power. He felt invincible. He gave it one more hard twist. Snap. It wasn't a loud noise. It wasn't an explosion. It was a small, sickening sound, like a dry twig stepping on a dead leaf. The key spun freely in his hand. Inside the bird, the shear pin I had installed for exactly this moment had snapped. It severed the connection between the winding arbor and the barrel. The tension released instantly but internally. The bird's head drooped, the beak closed. The light in the ruby eyes seemed to go out. Caleb turned the key again, and again. It just spun loose and useless. What did you do? Victor asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Nothing, Caleb stammered. It slipped. It needs to catch. He shook the bird. He banged it on the table. Don't, I shouted at the screen, startling myself. Victor reached out and grabbed Caleb's wrist. Stop, he said. You have broken the mainspring, or sheared the arbor. Either way, you have turned a masterpiece into a paperweight. No, Caleb yelled. It works. It just needs a second. Naya, get me a screwdriver. I am not buying a broken toy, Victor said, taking off his gloves. He picked up his briefcase. Wait, Caleb pleaded, blocking his path. I can fix it. The old man, he has tools. I can fix it in 5 minutes. Just wait. $3 million for a working automaton, Victor said. For scrap gold, maybe 50,000. Call me when you learn how to handle merchandise. Victor walked out the back door. The silence he left behind was deafening. Caleb stood there holding the dead bird. He looked at the door. Then he looked at the bird. Then he looked at Naya. His face turned a color I had never seen before. A dark, violent purple. He turned and hurled the golden bird across the room. It hit the wall with a heavy thud and crashed to the floor. A ruby eye popped out and rolled under the workbench. You idiot, he screamed at Nia. Me, Nia cried, shrinking back. You broke it. You wound it too hard. Because it was junk. Caleb roared, kicking the workbench. It was old, brittle junk. Your father set us up. He knew it was broken. That is why he kept it in a box. He paced around the room, running his hands through his hair. $3 million, Nia. We had it. It was right there. He grabbed a bottle of scotch and took a long swig. He wiped his mouth. He looked like a cornered animal. We are broke, he whispered. I owe people money, Nia. Bad people. I told them I would pay them tomorrow. If I don't pay them. He looked at her with wild, terrifying eyes. Nia was crying now. Soft, pathetic sobs. Maybe we should just sell the gold, she said. 50,000 is still something. 50,000 won't even cover the interest, Caleb spat. He looked around the room. His eyes landed on the door to the storage room, the door that led to the basement. He walked over to it. He stared at the darkness beyond. He hid the bird down there, Caleb muttered. In the first room, but there was another wall, Nia. Did you see it? What wall? Behind the display cases, Caleb said. The airflow. I felt a draft coming from the back wall. It wasn't a solid wall. It was a partition. He turned back to her, a manic grin spreading across his face. This was just the decoy, he said, pointing at the broken bird on the floor. The old man is smart. He put the shiny thing in the front to stop people from looking deeper. He walked back to the workbench and grabbed the diamond drill. There is more down there, he said. There has to be. You don't build a vault like that for one bird. He has a hoard, Nia, a real hoard. Drawings, patents, maybe uncut gems. Caleb, Nia pleaded. Let's just go. This place creeps me out. We are not going anywhere, Caleb said, checking the battery on the drill. We are going back down, and this time we are not stopping at the first room. We are going to strip this place to the studs. He grabbed a flashlight and threw it at her. Move, he ordered. I watched them disappear into the hallway. I sat back in my motel chair. My coffee was finished. Caleb was right about one thing. There was more down there. There was a lifetime of work. There were things that the world had forgotten. But he was wrong about the draft. That wasn't poor construction. That was the ventilation system for the preservation chamber. And by going back down there after breaking the bird, he had unknowingly walked into the belly of the beast. The bird was the key. Breaking it didn't just ruin the sale, it sent a signal to the building's central processor. Threat detected. Level 1 failsafe failed. Initiate Level 2. I opened a new window on my laptop. It showed the environmental controls for the lower basement. Status active. Oxygen flow 100%. Door seals open. I watched the numbers. "Go ahead, Caleb," I whispered. "Find the false wall. Knock it down. Because once you step through that second threshold, the house stops being a home. It becomes a prison." I didn't reach for the phone to call the police. I didn't reach for my keys to go stop them. I just watched. They wanted to dig for gold. I was going to let them dig until they hit the bedrock. And then I was going to pull up the ladder. The night was far from over, and the lesson had just begun. The sledgehammer hit the drywall with a sound that vibrated through my laptop speakers and into my bones. I sat in the dim light of the Starlight Motel watching a live stream of my own destruction. Caleb didn't know how to find a structural weak point. He didn't know how to use a stud finder. He just swung that heavy iron hammer with the blind rage of a man who had been denied his prize. Dust billowed out, filling the camera frame with a white, choking fog. Naya was standing back, covering her mouth with her designer scarf, the one I bought her for Christmas 3 years ago. She looked terrified, but she didn't stop him. She didn't say Dad wouldn't like this. She just watched, waiting to see if there was gold behind the plaster. Another swing, then another. The false wall I had built 20 years ago began to crumble. I had built it to protect them. I built it to keep the humidity out and the temperature stable. But mostly I built it to keep the world away from the things that mattered. Caleb kicked a jagged piece of sheetrock. It fell inward, revealing the darkness beyond. He stopped breathing heavy. He shone his flashlight into the hole. I leaned closer to my screen. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm. This was it. The sanctum sanctorum. The place where I went when the world got too loud. Caleb stepped through the hole. Naya followed him. The motion sensors inside the inner chamber detected their heat signatures. The lights flickered on. They weren't harsh fluorescent lights like in the shop. They were warm, museum-quality LEDs designed to emit zero UV radiation. The room was vast. It ran the entire length of the building foundation. The walls were lined with mahogany shelves, and on those shelves sat the history of human ingenuity. "Holy," Caleb's voice trailed off. He dropped the sledgehammer. It clanged against the polished concrete floor, but he didn't notice. He was looking at the automata. There were hundreds of them. In the center of the room on a raised dais stood the writer. It was a restoration of the original Jacques Dreux's piece. A mechanical boy who could dip a quill in ink and write any sentence you programmed into his camstack. Beside him was the draftsman capable of drawing 4 distinct portraits, including a sketch of Louis XV. But those were just the famous ones. The shelves were filled with my own creations. The Clockwork Orchestra, the iron spider that could weave a web of silk, the perpetual motion galaxy. Caleb walked forward like a man in a trance. He reached out and touched the glass case of a singing bird pistol. It was made of blue enamel and encrusted with pearls. "This isn't a workshop, Nia," he whispered. "This is a treasury." He turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the wall. Framed on the far wall were the patents. U.S. Patent number 4590, Mechanism for Gyroscopic Stabilization in Miniature Robotics. U.S. Patent number 5122, Fluid Dynamic Gear Systems. There were 50 of them. Naya walked over to the wall. She read the name on the patents. Inventor Winston Graves. "He invented them," she whispered. She sounded shocked. "My dad invented these technologies." Caleb laughed. A high manic sound that bounced off the steel walls. "He didn't just invent them, babe. He licensed them." Caleb ran to a filing cabinet in the corner. He ripped it open. He pulled out a folder. "Look at these contracts," he shouted. "Lockheed Martin, Boston Dynamics, Swiss Watch Group. Your father isn't a tinkerer, Nia. He is the ghost in the machine. He has been collecting royalties on these patents for 40 years. He threw the papers in the air. They fluttered down like snow. "He is worth millions," Caleb screamed. 50 million, maybe 100, and he has been hiding it all down here while you were driving a used Honda." I watched Nia's face on the screen. I saw the shock turn into something else, something ugly. She looked around the room. She didn't see the genius. She didn't see the nights I stayed up until dawn perfecting a gear ratio so the movement would be fluid. She didn't see the art. She saw a shopping list. She walked over to the writer. She looked at the mechanical boy. He lied to me, she said. Her voice was trembling with indignation. He told me he couldn't afford to send me to Europe for my gap year. He told me the shop was struggling. She turned to Caleb. Her eyes were wet, but not with sadness, with greed. I want a villa, she said, in Tuscany, with a pool. You can have 10 villas, Caleb said, grabbing a golden sextant from a shelf. We can buy the whole damn village. He ran his hands over the glass cases, leaving greasy smears on the pristine surfaces. We need a truck, he said. A big one. We are going to empty this place, Nia. We are going to take everything. The robots, the drawings, the patents. We sell the hardware to the collectors in Dubai, and we sell the IP to the tech companies in Silicon Valley. He looked at Nia and grinned. We are going to be kings. Nia smiled back. It was a smile I didn't recognize. It was the smile of a stranger. I deserve this, she said. I put up with his lectures for years. I put up with his smell of oil and dust. I listened to him drone on about hard work and discipline, and all the while he was sitting on this. She picked up a small silver dancer. She didn't hold it carefully. She held it by the leg, dangling it like a dead mouse. Forget the Honda, she said. I want a Bentley. No, a Rolls-Royce. A white one. I sat in my motel room and felt a tear roll down my cheek. It wasn't for the money. The $50 million estimate, Caleb shouted, was actually low. The collection was priceless because many of those pieces were one of a kind. But I didn't care about the value. I cared about the disrespect. These machines were my children. I had birthed them from metal and patience. I had breathed life into them with springs and levers. And now my biological child, the one I had loved more than any machine, was talking about selling them to buy a car. She had forgotten me. In that room surrounded by my soul, she didn't mention my name once. She didn't ask where I was sleeping tonight. She didn't ask if I was in pain from the fall. I was just an obstacle that had been removed, a lock that had been broken. Caleb was pulling drawers open now, dumping blueprints onto the floor. These were original schematics from the 1700s drawn on vellum. He was stepping on them with his muddy boots. Careful, you idiot, I whispered to the screen, my hand gripping the edge of the desk. Look at this, Caleb shouted, holding up a ledger. It is the inventory list. He has everything cataloged. This makes our job so much easier. He looked at the camera. He looked right at the lens hidden in the eye of a grandfather clock. He didn't know I was watching, but it felt like he was taunting me. Thanks, Pops, he said to the empty room. You really organized your estate sale well. I closed my laptop for a second. I needed to breathe. The rage was making my hands shake, and a watchmaker cannot have shaking hands. They were dregs. They were barbarians burning down the library because they were cold. They couldn't understand what they were touching. To them, a patent was just a piece of paper that traded for cash. To them, an automaton was just a toy that traded for a vacation. They were going to destroy it all. They would sell the pieces to different buyers. They would separate the writer from the draftsman. They would lose the winding keys. They would let the gears rust. I opened the laptop again. Nia was taking a selfie with the golden bird pistol. She was posing, making a duck face, holding a masterpiece of engineering like it was a prop. Enough. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number that I had saved for a worst-case scenario. It was the number of Arthur Sterling, my personal attorney. Not the family lawyer who handled the shop's lease. The real lawyer. The one who managed the Graves Foundation. Winston Arthur answered immediately. It is 3 a.m. Is everything all right? No, Arthur, I said. The contingency has occurred. There was a silence on the line. Arthur knew what that meant. We had drafted the papers 10 years ago after Naya dropped out of college and stole my credit card for the first time. Are you sure? Arthur asked. Once we execute this, there is no going back. The assets are transferred immediately. It becomes a federal matter. I looked at the screen. Caleb was trying to pry a gemstone off the writer's coat. I am sure, I said. They are in the vault, Arthur. They are damaging the collection. I understand, Arthur said. I will file the papers electronically with the court as soon as the clerk's office opens. But Winston, this puts your daughter in a very difficult position. She put herself there, I said. And Arthur. Yes, Winston. Activate trap number 1, the legal trap. I want them to think they are stealing from an old man. I don't want them to know who the real owner is until it is too late. I will send the courier in the morning, Arthur said. I am sorry, Winston. I know how much you hoped this day would never come. I hung up the phone. I looked at the screen one last time. Nia was laughing. She was spinning around in the center of the room, surrounded by the treasures she thought were hers. She looked happy. "Enjoy the dream, Nia," I whispered, "because when you wake up you are going to find out that the bed you made is very hard and very cold." I turned off the screen. I lay back on the lumpy motel mattress. I listened to the sirens outside. Tomorrow the war would move from the basement to the battlefield of the law, and I was bringing heavy artillery. The sun was beginning to set, casting long orange shadows across the peeling wallpaper of my motel room. I sat in the chair, my bad leg propped up on the bed, watching the screen of my laptop. I had sent the courier an hour ago. He was not a regular mailman. He was a process server named Mr. Henderson, a man who took his job as seriously as an undertaker. I watched the feed from the front door camera. I saw Henderson press the buzzer. He stood tall in his dark suit, holding a thick envelope with a red seal. Inside the shop, Nia jumped. I saw her on the interior camera. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by the mess they had made trying to categorize the loot. She looked at the door like it was a monster's mouth. "Who is that?" she whispered. Caleb looked up from a ledger he was reading. "Probably a buyer," he said. I put the word out on the dark web. People are hungry for this stuff. He walked to the door and threw it open. He expected a criminal with a bag of cash. Instead, he got Mr. Henderson, Mr. Caleb Thorne. Henderson asked, his voice flat and professional. "Who is asking?" Caleb said, trying to look tough but failing in his dirty t-shirt. "I have a legal notification for Ms. Nia Graves and the occupants of this property." Henderson thrust the envelope into Caleb's chest. Caleb grabbed it instinctively. Before he could argue, Henderson turned on his heel and walked away. Caleb slammed the door. He looked at the envelope. It was heavy, expensive stationery. "What is it?" Nia asked, standing up and wiping dust from her jeans. "Is it the eviction?" Caleb ripped it open. He pulled out the documents. There were 3 pages. Thick, cream-colored paper. He started reading. I saw his eyebrows knit together. He stopped. He read the same line again. Then he laughed. It was a nervous laugh. A laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "This is a joke," he said. What Nia asked, snatching the paper from him. "Let me see." I leaned closer to my screen. I knew every word on that page. I had written them myself 10 years ago with the help of the best estate attorney in the state. Nia began to read aloud. Her voice trembled. "Notification of custodial responsibility regarding the assets of the Graves Foundation for Mechanical Arts." She paused. "Foundation," she whispered. "What foundation?" She kept reading. "Please be advised that the property located at 424 4th Street, including all subterranean storage facilities and the contents therein, are not the personal property of Mr. Winston Graves." She stopped breathing. I could see her chest freeze. On October 14th, 2014, legal ownership of the entire collection, including all patents, prototypes, and antiquities, was transferred in perpetuity to the Graves Foundation, a federally registered non-profit organization dedicated to the preservation of horological history. She looked up at Caleb. Her face was the color of old ash. "He doesn't own it," she whispered. "Dad doesn't own it." "Keep reading," Caleb snapped. "That is just legal jargon. It doesn't mean anything." Nia looked back at the paper. "Mr. Winston Graves serves solely as the lifetime custodian of the collection. Any removal, sale, or destruction of these assets does not constitute theft of personal property. It constitutes the embezzlement of charitable assets and the destruction of federally protected historical heritage." She dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing on the pile of priceless drawings they had been trampling on. "Federal," she choked out. "Caleb, this isn't a civil suit. If we sell this, we aren't stealing from my dad. We are stealing from a charity." "So what?" Caleb yelled, throwing his hands up. "Who cares who owns it? It is just paper, Nia." "It matters," Nia screamed. Her panic was finally breaking through her greed. "Stealing from a person is larceny. Stealing from a nonprofit is federal fraud. The mandatory minimum sentence is 10 years, Caleb. 10 years without parole. And the fines are triple the value of the stolen goods." She backed away from the pile of gold on the table. "We have to put it back," she said. "We have to put it all back. We can't sell this. If we try to auction this, the FBI will be on us in 5 minutes." I watched her from my motel room. Finally, she understood. I hadn't built that legal wall to hoard my wealth. I built it to protect myself from exactly this moment. I knew that one day someone would try to take it. I knew that my own flesh and blood might look at my legacy and see a payday. So I gave it away. I gave it to history. I made myself a servant to my own creation so that no one could ever hold a gun to my head and demand I sell it. I couldn't sell it even if I wanted to. But Caleb Thorne was not a man who respected boundaries. He was a man who saw a wall and thought he could smash it. He walked over to Nia. He grabbed her by the shoulders. He shook her hard. "Stop it," he hissed. "Stop panicking. Look at me." Nia looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "We are going to prison, Caleb." "No, we are not," he said. He let go of her and picked up the letter. He held it up like it was a dirty rag. "This," he said, "is a bluff." "It is not a bluff," Nia cried. "It is notarized." "It is a piece of paper," Caleb roared. "Just like the paper that said your dad was crazy. Just like the paper that said I am your guardian. Papers are for people who follow the rules, Nia. We are not following the rules anymore." He walked over to the lighter on the workbench. "The butane torch I used for soldering gold." He flicked it on. The blue flame hissed. "Caleb, no." Nia pleaded. He held the letter to the flame. I watched the cream-colored paper curl and blacken. I watched the words federal offense turn into smoke. "Your dad is trying to scare us," Caleb said calmly, watching the fire eat the warning. "He knows we found the motherlode. He knows he can't stop us physically, so he is trying to stop us psychologically. He thinks if he throws big words at us, we will run away with our tails between our legs." He dropped the burning paper onto the floor and stomped on it with his boot. "He forgot who he is dealing with," Caleb said. "I don't care about charities. I don't care about foundations. But we can't sell it," Nia sobbed. "No auction house will touch it without provenance. If the foundation owns it, we can't prove title." Caleb smiled. It was a dark, ugly smile. Who said anything about auction houses? He walked over to the shelf and picked up a diamond-encrusted pocket watch. "We are not going to Sotheby's, Nia. We are going underground." "Underground," she whispered. "The black market," Caleb said. "The Russians, the cartels, the private collectors who don't ask where a piece came from as long as it looks good on their mantle. They don't care about foundations. They don't care about the FBI. They pay cash. Untraceable cash." He walked back to her and stroked her hair. "We sell it all," he said softly, "piece by piece. We melt down what we can't sell. We strip the gems. Who is going to know Nia? Who? The foundation." He laughed. "Your dad is the foundation, and he is sitting in a motel room crying into his pillow. By the time anyone realizes what is happening, we will be on a beach in Brazil with new names and new faces." Nia looked at the ashes on the floor. She looked at Caleb. I could see the war inside her. The fear of prison versus the fear of losing him. The fear of her father versus the greed for the gold. Greed won. It always wins with Nia. She wiped her eyes. "How do we find these buyers?" she asked. Caleb grinned. "Leave that to me. I know a guy. He is coming tonight." I sat back in my chair. The screen was still glowing, but the room felt darker. They had crossed the line. The final line. When they broke into the basement, it was trespassing. When they took the bird, it was theft. But burning that letter, that was a declaration of war against the future. Caleb was right about one thing. I was sitting in a motel room, but I wasn't crying. I picked up my phone. I sent a text to my lawyer, Arthur. They burned the notice. "Proceed to phase 2. Arthur texted back immediately. "Are you sure, Winston? Phase 2 is the nuclear option." I looked at the screen. Caleb was kissing Nia, telling her everything was going to be fine. He was lying to her just like he lied to everyone else. "I am sure." I put the phone down. Caleb thought the black market was his playground. He thought he knew the sharks. But he didn't know that the biggest shark in the water was the old man he had pushed down the stairs. He wanted to sell to the underground. Fine, I would give him an underground. I opened a new window on my laptop. I accessed the contact list I had built over 40 years of restoring antiques for the world's most powerful and dangerous people. I found the number for a man named Sergey, a man who used to be KGB before he became a collector of rare clocks, a man who owed me a favor for fixing a watch that had belonged to Stalin. I typed a message. "The timekeeper has a fire sale. Come to the back door at midnight. Bring cash." I wasn't inviting a buyer. I was inviting a wolf to eat the rats. Caleb wanted a dark deal. I was going to make sure it was so dark he would never see the sun again. The rain had stopped, but the air inside my motel room felt heavy like the pressure before a hurricane. I sat in the dark, illuminated only by the blue glow of my laptop screen. On the desk beside me, my burner phone sat silent and waiting. It was midnight, the witching hour, the time when the monsters come out to play. But tonight, the monsters were in my basement and they were wearing expensive suits. I watched the camera feed. Caleb had transformed my sanctuary into a bazaar. He had dragged a folding table into the center of the room and covered it with a black cloth. On top of it, he had arranged my masterpieces like cheap trinkets at a flea market. The silver swan, the draftsman, the clockwork orchestra. He had even polished them with his shirt sleeve, leaving streaks of grease on the delicate enamel. Nia was standing in the corner holding a tray of champagne glasses. She looked pale. Her hands were shaking as she poured the cheap, sparkling wine Caleb had bought at the corner store. She was trying to play the hostess, but she looked more like a prisoner awaiting a verdict. Then the back door opened. Caleb's contact had come through. 3 men walked in. 2 of them were exactly what I expected. Low-level hustlers. Men in leather jackets with shifty eyes who buy stolen radios and fence grandmother's jewelry. They walked around, poking at the glass cases, asking if the gold was solid or plated. But the third man, he was different. He walked with a heavy cane not because he needed it, but because it was a weapon. He wore a cashmere coat that cost more than Caleb's car. His hair was silver, cut close to his scalp, and his eyes were like chips of ice. Sergey. I smiled in the darkness of my motel room. Sergey wasn't a criminal anymore, not technically. 30 years ago, he ran the biggest smuggling ring in Eastern Europe. Then he retired. He bought a vineyard in Napa and started collecting clocks. I had restored a Faberge egg for him 5 years ago. It took me 6 months. When I finished, he told me that if I ever needed a favor, I just had to ask. Tonight I asked. Caleb didn't know who Sergey was. He just saw a rich old man. He saw a whale. "Welcome, gentlemen," Caleb announced, clapping his hands together. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. What you see before you is the Graves collection, a lost treasury of mechanical wonders." He picked up the silver swan. "This piece here," he said, holding it by the neck, causing me to wince, 18-karat gold feathers, ruby eyes. It swims. It sings. I am starting the bidding at 100,000. One of the leather jacket men laughed. 100 grand for a wind-up duck, one of them sneered. "You are crazy, kid. I will give you 5,000 for the melt weight." Caleb's face turned red. "Melt weight? This is art, you moron. This is history. Art doesn't pay the bills," the man said. "Gold does. 5,000. Take it or leave it." Caleb looked at Nia. Panic was starting to set in. He realized that the black market isn't like Sotheby's. There are no polite paddles here. There are only wolves. Then Sergey stepped forward. The sound of his cane hitting the concrete floor was like a gunshot. Thud. Everyone stopped. "I will take it," Sergey said. His voice was deep, accented, and dripping with authority. Caleb's eyes lit up. "You will." 100,000. "No," Sergey said. He walked around the table, his eyes scanning the shelves. "I do not want the bird. I do not want the clock. I want it all." He swept his hand across the room, encompassing the entire collection. The patents, the prototypes, the finished pieces, everything. Caleb's mouth fell open. "Everything." Sergey nodded. "I am a collector, Mr. Thorne. I do not like to break up sets. I will buy the entire room." "Lock, stock, and barrel." Nia stepped forward, her eyes wide. She put down the champagne tray. "How much?" she whispered. Sergey looked at her. He looked at her with the disdain a lion has for a hyena. $5 million, he said. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the ventilation system. You could hear Caleb's heart beating. $5 million. It was the number they had dreamed of. It was the villa in Tuscany. It was the Rolls Royce. It was the end of their problems. Caleb let out a breath that sounded like a sob. 5 million. Cash. Sergey nodded. A wire transfer. To an offshore account of your choosing. Tonight. Caleb grabbed Nia. He hugged her, lifting her off her feet. "We did it, babe," he screamed. "We are rich. We are actually rich." He turned to the other 2 buyers. Get out of here. The auction is over." The two men grumbled and left, slamming the door behind them. They knew better than to argue with a man like Sergei. Now it was just the three of them, and me watching from the dark. Caleb turned to Sergei, rubbing his hands together. Okay. 5 million. Let's do this. Do you want my account number now? Sergei didn't move. He stood perfectly still, his hands resting on his cane. There is a condition, he said. Caleb's smile faltered. Condition. What condition? Provenance, Sergei said. Caleb blinked. Provenance. Papers, Sergei explained. I am a serious collector, Mr. Thorne. I do not buy toys. I buy history. I need the schematics. I need the original blueprints signed by Winston Graves. I need the patent transfer documents. Without them, these are just pretty machines. With them, they are a legacy. Caleb laughed nervously. Oh, the papers. Yeah, sure, we have them. Somewhere. The old man was a hoarder, you know. They are probably in a box upstairs. Sergei shook his head. No, they are not upstairs. He pointed his cane toward the far corner of the room. Hidden behind a stack of crates was a heavy titanium safe. It was the only thing in the room Caleb hadn't been able to open. They are in there, Sergei said. Caleb looked at the safe. Then he looked at Sergei. How do you know that? Because that is where a man like Winston Graves would keep his soul, Sergei said. Caleb walked over to the safe. It was a TL-30 rated vault, drill-resistant, torch-resistant. It had a digital keypad and a biometric scanner. He tried the handle. Locked. He punched in 1234. Error. He punched in Nia's birthday. Error. He kicked it. Open it, Sergei said, checking his watch. My plane leaves in 2 hours. No papers, no deal. Caleb began to sweat. He pulled at his collar. Look, he said, desperate. We can send you the papers later. I will mail them to you. Just wire the money now. Sergei laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. You take me for a fool. No papers, no money. You have 1 hour. Sergei pulled up a chair and sat down. He crossed his legs and looked at Caleb expectantly. Caleb looked at Nia. Do you know the code? Nia shook her head, terrified. I don't know. He never let me down here. Maybe it is Mom's birthday. Try it, Caleb screamed. Nia typed in a date. Error. A red light flashed on the safe. Lockout imminent. Caleb paced the room. He ran his hands through his hair. $5 million was sitting in a chair 10 feet away, and he couldn't touch it because of a steel box. He looked at the safe. He looked at the drill. He knew the drill wouldn't work on titanium. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at the camera. He knew. He grabbed his phone. In my motel room, I watched him dial. I counted the rings. 1, 2, 3. I picked up the burner phone. Hello, Caleb, I said, my voice calm. You old son of a bitch, Caleb screamed. His voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. You are watching us, aren't you? I am watching you destroy my life, Caleb. Yes. Cut the crap, Caleb yelled. I have a buyer. A real buyer. $5 million, Winston. Do you hear me? $5 million. I heard. He wants the papers. Caleb said, his voice shaking with rage. The blueprints, the patents, they are in the safe, aren't they? They are, I said. Give me the code, Caleb demanded. Give me the damn code right now. Or what I asked. Caleb looked at the camera. He walked right up to it until his face filled the screen. His eyes were bloodshot. His teeth were bared. Or I burn it, he whispered. I felt a chill go down my spine. If you don't give me the code, Caleb hissed, I will take a can of gasoline and I will torch this whole place. I will burn your toys. I will burn your drawings. I will burn this building to the ground. If I can't have the money, no one gets anything. I looked at the screen. He meant it. He was desperate enough to do it. And Nia, I asked, will you burn her too? Nia was standing in the background, sobbing. She looked at Caleb with horror. She realized then that he wasn't just a thief. He was a pyromaniac. He would destroy everything she ever knew just to spite me. Caleb ignored the question. You have 10 seconds, old man. Give me the code or I strike the match. I looked at the timer on my laptop. The ventilation system was fully sealed. The oxygen levels were stable but finite. If he started a fire down there with the vents closed, they would suffocate in 3 minutes. But if I gave him the code... I looked at the safe on the screen. Inside that safe wasn't the blueprints. I had moved the real blueprints to the bank years ago. Inside that safe was the dossier, the police report, the evidence of Caleb's past crimes, the warrants for his arrest in Ohio and Florida. I smiled. He wanted the papers. I would give him the papers. Okay, Caleb, I said. You win. Don't burn the shop. Caleb let out a breath. He grinned at the camera. A triumphant, ugly grin. Smart move, Pops. What is the numbers? I paused. I wanted him to sweat for one more second. It is a date, I said. What date? Nia's birthday. I lied, but not the day she was born. The day she was supposed to be born. Her due date. Caleb frowned. What? Ask her, I said. She knows. Caleb turned to Nia. What is he talking about? What is your due date? Nia wiped her eyes. She looked confused. October 24th, she whispered. I was 2 weeks late. Dad always talked about it. He said I was late because I wanted to make an entrance. October 24th, 1995, I said. Caleb punched the numbers into the keypad. Beep, beep, beep. The light turned green. The heavy click of the tumblers disengaging echoed through the room. Caleb cheered. He grabbed the handle. You see, he yelled at Sergey. I told you I could do it. Sergey stood up. He adjusted his coat. Excellent, Sergey said. Show me the papers. Caleb pulled the heavy door open. He reached into the darkness of the safe. He expected to pull out the keys to a kingdom. Instead, he was about to pull out his own handcuffs. I watched on the screen as his hand closed around the thick manila envelope sitting alone on the metal shelf. Go ahead, Caleb, I whispered to the empty motel room. Open it. Read your future. Caleb pulled the envelope out. He held it up like a trophy. Here it is, he shouted. The provenance. He didn't know that the only thing he had proven was his own guilt. I hung up the phone. I leaned back in my chair. The trap was sprung. The rat had taken the cheese. Now all that was left was for the cage to snap shut. The neon sign of the Starlight Motel buzzed outside my window like a dying insect trapped in a jar. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I sat in the darkness of room 12 watching the dust motes dance in the sliver of orange light that cut through the curtains. My laptop was closed. I didn't need to look at the screen to know what was happening. I could feel it. I could feel the vibration of the chaos I had unleashed just a few miles away. Then came the knock. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a frantic pounding, a desperate fist hammering against the cheap particle board. I didn't move immediately. I let him knock. I let him stand out there in the cold hallway smelling the stale cigarette smoke and his own fear. A clockmaker knows that timing is everything. You do not rush the chime. Open up, Winston. I know you are in there. It was Caleb. His voice was cracked and high-pitched. The arrogance of the auction was gone, replaced by something jagged and raw. I stood up slowly. My bad legs stiffened, but I forced myself to walk upright. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Caleb pushed past me into the room. He looked like a man who had been running from a fire. His expensive shirt was stained with sweat. His hair, usually plastered down with gel, was wild and sticking up in tufts. He smelled of fear. It is a distinct smell, sour and metallic like old copper coins. He paced the small room, kicking at the carpet. He didn't look at me at first. He looked at the walls. He looked at the closed laptop. He looked everywhere except my eyes. We have a problem, old man, he said, his voice trembling. I sat back down in the single chair the room provided. I rested my hands on my cane. I didn't ask him to sit. I imagine you do, Caleb, I said, my voice calm. The auction didn't go well, did it? Caleb spun around. His eyes were bloodshot. The pupils were dilated pinpricks of black in a sea of red. The auction is fine, he spat. The buyer is ready. The money is ready. But we have a situation, a medical situation. He took a deep breath, composing his face into a mask of tragedy. It was a bad performance. I have seen better acting from the marionettes I restore. It is Nia, he said. His voice dropped to a whisper. She collapsed, Winston. About an hour ago. We were in the basement moving some crates and she just went down. She hit her head. It is bad. I watched him. I watched the way his hands twitched. I watched the way he licked his lips. He was lying. I knew he was lying because 5 minutes ago I had checked the camera feed and Nia was sitting on the floor of the vault counting a stack of cash Caleb had taken from the register. She is at the hospital now. Caleb continued, gaining confidence in his lie. The doctors say it is a brain bleed, an aneurysm. They need to operate immediately, Winston. It is life or death. I felt a cold stone settle in my gut. It wasn't fear for Nia, it was disgust. This man was using my daughter's imaginary death to extort me. He was painting a picture of her bleeding out on a gurney just to get a combination to a safe. And let me guess, I said softly. The surgery is expensive. Caleb nodded vigorously. They want cash up front. It is a specialist. He doesn't take insurance. We need $50,000, Winston. Right now. Or she dies. He took a step toward me. He grabbed my shoulders. His grip was wet and clammy. You are her father, he pleaded. You can't let her die. I know you have hidden assets. I know the safe in the basement has cash in it. Just give me the code. I will run down there, get the money, and save her. Please, Winston, do it for your little girl. I looked at his hands on my shoulders. I looked at the fake tears welling up in his eyes. It was psychological torture. He was trying to break me by twisting the knife of parental love. He thought that if he squeezed my heart hard enough, money would bleed out. But he made a miscalculation. He thought he was talking to a father, but tonight he was talking to an auditor. And the numbers didn't add up. If she is in the hospital, Caleb, I said, why are you here? Why aren't you holding her hand? Caleb blinked. I told you, I need the money. You came to a motel, I said. You drove 20 minutes across town while your girlfriend is supposedly dying. That doesn't sound like love, Caleb. That sounds like a transaction. Caleb's face hardened. The mask slipped. The grieving boyfriend vanished and the thug returned. Cut the crap, old man, he snarled, pushing me back into the chair. Give me the code. I know the papers are in there. Sergey won't transfer the $5 million without the provenance documents. I need to open that safe. Ah, I said. So it is not surgery. It is Sergey. I don't care what you call it, Caleb screamed. He pulled a knife from his pocket. It was a switchblade, the kind teenagers buy to feel tough. He clicked it open. The blade glinted in the neon light. I am done playing games, he hissed, pressing the tip of the blade against the fabric of my shirt. Give me the combination, or I will carve it out of you. And after I am done with you, I will go back to the hospital and pull the plug on your daughter myself. I looked at the knife. Then I looked at him. I wasn't afraid. I was sad. I was sad that Nia had chosen this. I was sad that she had let this creature into our lives. But mostly I was sad because I knew what was going to happen next. You want the code, I asked. Yes, Caleb breathed. The code. I reached into my pocket. Caleb flinched, thinking I was reaching for a weapon. But I only pulled out a pen and a napkin from the bedside table. I smoothed the napkin on my knee. I wrote 3 numbers. October 24th, 1995. I handed the napkin to him. Caleb snatched it. He looked at the numbers. He frowned. What is this? He asked. It is a date, I said. He looked at me suspicious. What date? October 24th, 1995. I said. Caleb sneered. What is so special about that day? Is that when you made your first million? No, I said. My voice was quiet, barely a whisper in the silent room. That is the day Nia was born. Caleb stared at the napkin. Then he laughed, a cruel barking sound. Her birthday, he scoffed. Of course. You sentimental old fool. You made the combination her birthday. That is pathetic. He stuffed the napkin into his pocket. He backed away toward the door, keeping the knife pointed at me. You see, Pops, he said, grinning. It wasn't that hard. You just needed a little motivation. He put his hand on the doorknob. Caleb, I said. He stopped. What? Listen to me very carefully, I said. I stood up, leaning heavily on my cane. I looked him dead in the eye. If you open that safe, I said, there is no going back. That combination. It is not just a lock. It is a threshold. Once you cross it, you can never return to the life you had. You can never undo what you find inside. Caleb rolled his eyes. Save the spooky speech for the ghost stories, old man. I am going to be rich. I am going to open that safe, get the papers, take the money, and fly to Rio, and you can rot in this motel. He opened the door. The cold night air rushed in. Give my love to Nia, I said, if you see her. Caleb laughed again. Don't hold your breath, he said. He slammed the door. I heard his footsteps running down the hallway. I heard the engine of his car roar to life in the parking lot. He was speeding back to the shop, back to the basement, back to the gold. I sat back down. I picked up the remote and turned on the small television in the corner. I turned the volume down low. He thought he had won. He thought he had bullied a weak old man into submission. He thought October 24th, 1995 was the key to his freedom. He didn't know the truth. October 24th, 1995 was the day Nia was born. It was the happiest day of my life. I held her in my arms and promised I would protect her from the world. But tonight I had given him that date not to open a treasure chest but to seal a coffin. I opened my laptop again. I watched the feed. Nia was pacing in the vault. She wasn't sick. She wasn't dying. She was just greedy. Caleb would be there in 10 minutes. He would punch in the numbers. He would open the safe, and he would find out that some doors should never be opened. I waited. The clock on the wall ticked. Each second was a hammer blow. The torture wasn't what he did to me. The torture was knowing what I had to do to them. But a clockmaker knows that sometimes you have to dismantle the movement to fix the time. And Caleb Thorne was a broken gear that needed to be removed. I watched the screen. "Come on, Caleb," I whispered. "Come get your prize." I sat in the darkness of room 12 and watched the final act of my tragedy begin. Caleb burst through the door of the basement vault like a man possessed. He was sweating, he was panting, and he was grinning with the manic energy of a gambler who just put his last chip on the table and knows the wheel is rigged in his favor. He held the napkin I had given him in his hand, waving it like a winning lottery ticket. "I got it," he screamed, his voice echoing off the steel walls of the underground chamber. "I got the code. I got the—" Nia looked up from the floor where she had been pacing. She looked exhausted. Her makeup was smeared and her eyes were red, but when she saw Caleb, the hunger returned. It is a terrible thing to see your own child look at a thief like he is a savior. Sergei did not look impressed. He sat on the folding chair, his hands resting on the head of his cane, his face a mask of bored indifference. He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than my entire house. "You are late, Mr. Thorne," Sergei said. "My plane leaves in 45 minutes. If that safe is not open in 60 seconds, I am leaving and taking my $5 million with me." "It is open," Caleb yelled, running to the titanium wall of the safe. "It is open right now." The old man gave it up. He cracked. "I told you he would crack." Caleb stood in front of the keypad. He smoothed out the crumpled napkin on the metal surface. He took a deep breath. His fingers hovered over the buttons. 10, 2, 4, 9, 5. I watched on my laptop screen. I held my breath, not because I was afraid he wouldn't open it, but because I knew exactly what was waiting for him inside. Beep. The light on the safe turned from red to green. The sound of the heavy tumblers disengaging was loud in the silent room. Chunk, chunk, chunk. It sounded like the heavy footsteps of doom approaching. Caleb let out a whoop of joy. He grabbed the heavy steel handle and pulled. The door swung open on silent hinges, revealing the dark interior. "Here it is," Caleb shouted, turning to grin at Sergei. "The provenance, the blueprints, the keys to the kingdom." He reached into the safe. He expected to feel the heavy roll of vellum. He expected to feel the leather binding of my patent books. Instead, his hand closed around air. He frowned. He reached deeper. He patted the metal shelves. Empty. No, wait, not empty. There was something sitting on the center shelf, a single object, and next to it, a thick manila folder. Caleb pulled them out. He held them up to the light. In his left hand was a digital clock, a simple red LED timer wired to a small black box. It was counting down, 0059, 59, 0059, 58. "What is this?" Caleb whispered. He looked at the folder in his right hand. It wasn't a blueprint, it wasn't a patent. It was a standard police dossier stamped with the seal of the Private Investigator Association of America. Sergei stood up. He walked over to Caleb. He didn't look at the clock. He looked at the folder. "Is that the documentation?" Sergei asked. Caleb stammered. I think so. It must be." The old man said the papers were in here. Sergei snatched the folder from Caleb's trembling hands. He opened it. I watched Sergei's face. For the first time all night, the mask of indifference slipped. His eyes widened. Then they narrowed into slits of pure ice. He flipped through the pages. 1, 2, 3. He looked at Caleb, then he looked at the folder again. "This is not provenance," Sergei said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "This is a rap sheet." What Caleb asked. Sergei turned the folder around and held it up for Caleb to see. I saw it clearly on the high-definition camera feed. It was a mugshot. A mugshot of Caleb Thorne from 5 years ago. He looked younger, but the smug, arrogant smile was the same. Underneath the photo in bold red letters were the words "Wanted for wire fraud and grand larceny." Caleb froze. That is a mistake. That is old. Sergei flipped the page. And who is Vanessa Miller? Sergei asked, reading from the file. Or Sarah Jenkins? Or Emily Wong? Caleb turned pale. How do you know those names? Because they are all here, Sergei said, throwing the file onto the table. It's scattered across the surface, covering the antique automata with pages of evidence. I zoomed in on the papers. It was the result of 6 months of work by the best private investigator money could buy. I had hired him the week Nia brought Caleb home for dinner. I knew something was wrong with the boy. I knew he was too smooth, too eager. The file detailed everything. Subject Caleb Thorne, alias the Romeo of the Rust Belt. Modus operandi targets vulnerable women with wealthy elderly parents. Isolates victims from family. Gains access to family assets. Liquidates and vanishes. There were victim statements. There were bank records showing drained savings accounts. There were restraining orders. Sergei looked at Caleb with disgust. You are not a collector, he spat. You are a con artist. And a sloppy one. Sergei looked at the countdown clock sitting on the shelf. 00:58:30. And what is that? Sergei asked, pointing his cane at the red numbers. Caleb looked at the clock. I don't know. The old man put it there. Sergei laughed. A harsh barking sound. You fool! You opened a dead man's switch. Sergei turned to his bodyguards, the 2 men in leather jackets who had been waiting by the door. We are leaving, Sergei barked. Now, do not touch anything. Do not take anything. This entire room is radioactive. Wait, Caleb screamed, grabbing Sergei's arm. You can't leave. The deal, $5 million. I can explain the file. It is a setup. Winston forged it. Sergei shoved Caleb away. He hit the floor hard, sliding against the table leg. I do not do business with amateurs, Sergei said, adjusting his coat. And I certainly do not do business with men who are about to be raided by the FBI. You are burned, Mr. Thorne. You are heat. Sergei and his men turned and ran. They didn't walk. They ran. They scrambled up the stairs, their footsteps echoing like thunder. They knew what a dossier in a safe meant. It meant the police were already on their way. It meant the trap had been sprung. The back door slammed shut. The silence returned to the vault. Caleb sat on the floor, staring at the open safe. He looked at the countdown clock. 00:57:15. What is happening? He whispered. Nia walked over to the table. She had been silent this whole time, standing in the shadows, paralyzed by fear. But now she moved. She walked to the scattered papers. She picked up a sheet. It was a printout of an email chain between Caleb and a woman named Vanessa. Baby, just get your dad to sign the power of attorney. We can sell the lake house and move to Paris. I love you. Nia dropped the paper. She picked up another one. A police report from Florida. Suspect convinced victim to liquidate her 401k for a non-existent business investment. Suspect fled with $200,000. Nia looked at the date. It was 6 months before she met Caleb. She picked up the main profile page. Under the section labeled Current Target, it had a single name typed in bold letters. Nia Graves. Asset potential high. Vulnerability high. Notes. Subject is estranged from father. Father possesses high-value antique inventory. Subject is desperate for validation. Nia made a sound. It wasn't a scream. It was a whimper, like a dog that had been kicked by its master. She looked at Caleb. He was still sitting on the floor, staring at the safe, trying to process the loss of his $5 million. He didn't even notice her reading his life story. You didn't love me, Nia whispered. Caleb looked up. He blinked, dazed. What? You didn't love me, she said louder, her voice shaking with a rage so pure it vibrated through the laptop speakers. You targeted me. She threw the file at him. The papers fluttered around his head like white feathers. I was a job, she screamed. I was a mark. You picked me because my dad had money. You picked me because I was weak. Caleb scrambled to his feet. He looked at the papers. He realized the game was up. There was no point in lying anymore. The mask of the loving boyfriend fell away, completely revealing the cold predator underneath. He stood up and brushed the dust off his pants. He looked at Nia with the sneer. Yeah, Caleb said. You were a mark. So what? Nia gasped. She took a step back as if he had slapped her. Don't look at me like that, Caleb said, his voice dripping with venom. You made it easy, Nia. You were so desperate for attention. All I had to do was buy you a couple of dinners and tell you that you were pretty, and you handed me the keys to the kingdom. He laughed. Do you really think a guy like me would be with a girl like you if you didn't have something I wanted? Look at you. You are a dropout with daddy issues working at a diner. I am a businessman. A businessman, Nia screamed. You are a thief. You are a criminal. You ruined my life. I stole from my father for you. I broke into his shop for you. I burned his letters for you. And look where it got us, Caleb shouted back, gesturing to the empty room. Nowhere. Because your father is smarter than both of us. He played us, Nia. He knew exactly who I was. He let me in. He wanted this to happen. Caleb looked at the countdown clock. 00:55:00. He grabbed Nia's arm. We have to go, he said. That clock. I don't know what happens when it hits 0, but I don't want to be here to find out. We grab the gold bird and we run. Nia pulled her arm away. She looked at him with revulsion. I am not going anywhere with you, she hissed. Caleb's eyes went dark. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the switchblade again. I wasn't asking, he said. You are my insurance policy, Nia. If the cops are outside, I need a hostage, and you are the only one here. He lunged for her. I watched from my motel room helpless. My hand hovered over the phone to call the police, but I knew they wouldn't get there in time. Run, Nia, I shouted at the screen. Run! But she didn't run. She stood her ground. She looked at the man she had loved, the man she had betrayed her father for, and for the first time in her life she fought back. She grabbed a heavy brass gear from the table and swung it. It hit Caleb in the shoulder. He yelled in pain and dropped the knife. You bitch, he screamed. He tackled her. They fell to the floor amidst the scattered papers of his crimes. They rolled over the blueprints, over the patents, over the evidence of my legacy. It was ugly. It was violent. It was the end of the illusion. And above them on the shelf, the red numbers kept ticking down. 00:54:30. The time for lies was over. The time for judgment was here. And in the basement of the timekeeper, the gears were finally grinding the rats into dust. I sat in the dim light of room 12 at the Starlight Motel and witnessed the death of a romance. It is an ugly thing to watch love turn into hate in real time. On my laptop screen, the high-definition feed from the basement vault showed the aftermath of the struggle. Nia was on the ground, clutching her shoulder where the brass gear had grazed her. She looked up at Caleb, not with the eyes of a girlfriend, but with the terrified realization of a victim staring at her tormentor. The dossier lay scattered around them, a paper trail of broken hearts and emptied bank accounts that proved she was nothing special to him. She was just another line item in his long history of fraud. Caleb stood over her, breathing hard. He had regained his composure after the brief scuffle. He adjusted his shirt, which had been torn in the fight. He ran a hand through his messy hair and looked down at her with a sneer that chilled my blood even from miles away. You are pathetic, Nia, he spat. His voice was no longer the smooth charm of the salesman. It was the guttural growl of a cornered animal. You think because you read a file you know me. You don't know anything. You are just a spoiled brat who led me to a dry well. Nia scrambled backward, her heels scraping against the concrete floor. Get away from me, she sobbed. Get out of my house. I am calling the police. I am showing them everything. Caleb laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Your house, he mocked. You don't have a house, Nia. You burned the deed, remember? You helped me break in. You are an accomplice. If you call the cops, we both go to jail. But I have been to jail before. I can survive it. You would break in a week. He took a step toward her. The switchblade lay on the floor, forgotten. He didn't need a knife to hurt her. He had his hands and his rage. Nia tried to stand up. She tried to muster the last shred of dignity she had left. My father will kill you, she said, her voice trembling, when he finds out what you did. Your father is a ghost, Caleb shouted. He is sitting in a motel room, waiting to die. He can't help you. No one can help you. He reached down and grabbed her by the hair. Nia screamed a sound that pierced through my laptop speakers and made me grip the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to jump through the screen. I wanted to smash his face. but I stayed seated. The lesson wasn't finished yet. Caleb pulled her face close to his. "Listen to me, you little leech," he hissed. "I invested 6 months in you. I paid for dinners. I bought you clothes. I listened to you whine about your daddy issues. That was work, Nia. That was labor. And I expect a return on my investment." He let go of her hair and she slumped back against the wall. "Since we can't sell the art thanks to your dad's little paper trail trick, we are going to do this the hard way," Caleb said. He turned and looked at the shelves lined with my creations. He looked at the mechanical wonders that had taken me decades to build. He didn't see the beauty, he only saw the raw materials. "If I can't sell the robot, I will sell the parts," he said. He walked over to the nearest display case. Inside was the Clockwork Orchestra, a set of 4 mechanical musicians made of silver and ivory. It was one of my earliest pieces. Caleb didn't bother unlocking the case. He grabbed a heavy wrench from my tool bench. "No," Nia screamed, realizing what he was about to do. "Caleb, don't." Smash! The glass shattered, exploding into 1,000 diamonds of light. Caleb reached in and grabbed the violinist. He held it by the neck. "There are rubies in the eyes, right?" he asked, turning to Nia. "And the buttons on the coat are real pearl." He didn't wait for an answer. He took the wrench and brought it down on the delicate silver figure. Crunch! I flinched. I felt that blow in my own body. That violinist had taken me 2 years to perfect. I had calibrated the arm movement to mimic a real bow stroke, and in 1 second of greedy rage, Caleb had reduced it to scrap metal. He pried the ruby eyes out with the tip of a screwdriver. He tossed them into his pocket. He threw the mangled silver body onto the floor. Nia put her hands over her mouth. She was sobbing uncontrollably now. "Stop it," she begged. "Please stop it. Those are his babies." Caleb moved to the next one. The cellist. Smash. "I need 50,000 for a ticket to Brazil," Caleb yelled, swinging the wrench. "And I am going to get it 1 ounce at a time." He moved down the line like a tornado. He smashed the glass of the singing garden. He ripped the gold leaves off the mechanical tree. He crushed the porcelain flowers to get to the emerald pistils. It was a massacre. He was destroying millions of dollars of art to get a few $1,000s in loose gems. It was the ultimate act of ignorance. I watched him. My heart was breaking. Every blow of the hammer felt like he was hitting me, but I forced myself to watch. And more importantly, I forced Nia to watch. She needed to see this. She needed to see the man she chose over me destroying the things I loved. She needed to understand that when you invite a wolf into your home, he doesn't just eat the sheep, he tears down the barn. Caleb turned back to Nia, panting heavily. His pockets were bulging with gold scraps and gems. "Where are the rest?" he demanded. "Where is the high-carat stuff?" Nia shook her head mutely, tears streaming down her face. "Fine," Caleb said. "Be useless. Stay here and rot." He walked to the heavy steel door of the vault. "I am going to check the upstairs safe," he said. "Maybe there is cash in the register. You stay here and think about how much you owe me." He stepped out into the hallway and slammed the vault door shut. I heard the heavy lock engage. Nia ran to the door. She pounded on it. "Caleb," she screamed. Caleb opened the door. "Don't leave me down here." I heard Caleb's muffled voice from the other side. "Shut up. If I find cash, I might come back for you. If not, well, the air should last a few hours." His footsteps faded away up the stairs. Nia slid down the door until she hit the floor. She was trapped. Trapped in the tomb of her own making, surrounded by the broken remains of her father's legacy. The red numbers on the countdown clock on the shelf ticked away mercilessly. 0045, 00. She looked around the room. She looked at the smashed violinist. She looked at the torn blueprints. She was alone. Then she remembered. She patted her pockets frantically. Caleb had taken her keys. He had taken her dignity. But in his rage, he had forgotten one thing. Her phone. She pulled it out. Her hands were shaking so bad she dropped it twice. She picked it up. She didn't call the police. She didn't call Caleb. She dialed the only number that had never let her down. In the motel room, my burner phone sat on the desk. It started to vibrate. The screen lit up. Incoming call, Nia. I looked at it. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3. I picked it up. I didn't say hello. I just listened. "Dad," Nia sobbed. Her voice was broken. "Dad, are you there? Please answer." I held the phone to my ear. I watched her on the screen, pressing her phone against her tear-streaked cheek. "I am here, Nia." I said, my voice calm and steady. "Oh God, Dad," she cried. "You have to come home. He is crazy. Caleb is crazy. He locked me in the vault. He is smashing everything. He destroyed the orchestra. He is ripping the gold off the machines." "I know," I said. Nia froze. The line went silent for a second. "What do you mean you know?" she whispered. "I am watching you, Nia," I said. "I have been watching you since you broke the lock. I saw you let him in. I saw you try to sell the bird. I saw you burn the letter from the foundation." Nia looked up at the ceiling, scanning for the hidden cameras she had never noticed before. "You saw," she choked out. "You saw everything and you didn't stop him." "I couldn't stop him, Nia," I said. "You stopped me. You and that doctor's note, you and your greed. You wanted to be in charge. You wanted the inheritance. Well, look around you. This is your inheritance. Broken glass and a man who hates you. Dad, please," she begged, breaking down again. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I was stupid. I listened to him. He told me you didn't love me. He told me you were hoarding the money. I just wanted us to have a better life. A better life," I repeated, "by stealing my life. He is going to kill me, Dad," she sobbed. "He said he is going to sell the house. He said if he doesn't get the money, he is going to leave me down here to die. The air. It feels heavy, Dad. Is the air running out?" I looked at the environmental controls on my laptop. The oxygen levels were fine, but the fear was suffocating her. "Dad, help me," she screamed. "Call the police. Come save me." I sat there in the motel room. A father's instinct is to run into the fire, to shield his child from the pain. But I had done that for 28 years. I had shielded her from work. I had shielded her from consequences, and it had created this. If I saved her now, she would never learn. She would blame Caleb. She would say she was a victim. She wouldn't understand her role in the destruction. "Dad, why aren't you saying anything?" she cried. "He is upstairs. I can hear him smashing the office. He is destroying your heart, Dad. He is not destroying my heart." "Nia," I said softly, "my heart is in that vault, but it is not the machines." She stopped crying for a second, confused. "What?" "You are my heart, Nia," I said, "and watching you let him destroy you is harder than watching him smash any clock." "Then help me," she screamed. "I am helping you," I said. I looked at the screen. Caleb had come back down the stairs. I saw him on the hallway camera. He was carrying a sledgehammer he must have found in the garage. He was heading back to the vault, not to let her out, but to finish the job. He wanted the gold plating on the vault walls. "He is coming back," Nia whispered. "I hear him." "I know," I said. "Dad, tell me what to do." I took a deep breath. "There is nothing to do, Nia," I said. "You wanted the gold. You wanted the thief. Now you have both. But he is going to hurt me. He already hurt you, Nia," I said. "Now you have to decide if you are going to let him finish or if you are going to stand up." "Dad, please." "Let him smash it, Nia," I said, my voice hard as steel. "Let him smash it all. The clocks, the robots, the furniture. Let him strip the gold, because every piece he breaks is a piece of the lie you have been living. But—" "Goodbye, Nia," I said. "Dad, no." I hung up the phone. I watched on the screen as Nia stared at her mobile in disbelief. She couldn't believe I had abandoned her. She couldn't believe her safety net was gone. Then the vault door shook. Bang! Caleb was back, and he had a hammer. Nia stood up. She wiped her face. She looked at the door. She looked at the broken machines. And for the first time I saw something in her eyes that wasn't greed and wasn't fear. It was resolution. She looked around the room for a weapon. She picked up the heavy iron arm of the draftsman that Caleb had torn off. She gripped it in both hands. I nodded in my motel room. "Good girl," I whispered. "Stop crying. Start fighting." I turned my attention back to the control panel. The trap was entering its final phase. Caleb was busy destroying the room. Nia was ready to defend herself. But neither of them knew what was about to happen when that countdown clock hit 0. They thought the danger was each other. They forgot about the house itself, and the house was getting angry. The room inside the Starlight Motel was silent save for the hum of the mini fridge and the ragged breathing coming from my laptop speakers. I watched as Caleb Thorne prowled the basement vault like a tiger that had run out of meat. He was exhausted. His knuckles were bloody from punching glass and his shirt was soaked in sweat. He had destroyed the smaller pieces. The floor was littered with the corpses of silver birds and golden dancers. But it wasn't enough. He hadn't found the millions he promised himself. He hadn't found the stack of cash or the bag of diamonds. He turned his eyes to the back of the room. Standing in the alcove was the Sentinel. It was my largest creation, a 7-foot-tall automaton made of iron and brass modeled after the mythological giants of old. I had built it in 1989. It didn't sing. It didn't dance. It stood perfectly still, holding a heavy iron staff. Its chest was a massive plate of riveted steel. Caleb walked up to it. He tapped the chest plate with his sledgehammer. It rang with a hollow, deep sound. "Hear that, Nia?" he rasped, turning to my daughter who was huddled in the corner clutching the iron arm she had picked up for protection. "It is hollow. That is where he keeps it. The big money. The gold bars. It has to be inside the giant." Nia looked up. Her face was streaked with dust and tears. "Don't touch it, Caleb," she whispered. "Dad told me once never to touch the Sentinel. He said it was the load-bearing pin of the collection." Caleb laughed. "A load-bearing doll. You really believe everything that old man told you, don't you? It is a piggy bank, Nia, a giant iron piggy bank, and I am going to crack it open." He hefted the sledgehammer. He swung it back over his shoulder. I sat forward in my chair. "Don't do it, Caleb," I said to the screen. "That isn't a piggy bank. That is the trigger." But he couldn't hear me, and even if he could, he wouldn't have listened. "Greed is deaf." He grunted and brought the hammer down with all his might. Clang! The impact was tremendous. Sparks flew. The hammer hit the center of the Sentinel's chest. But the iron didn't break. It didn't shatter like the glass cases. Instead, it moved. The chest plate was designed on a pressure spring. The force of the blow drove the plate inward 3 inches. Click. It was the loudest click I have ever heard. It sounded like a gunshot in a canyon. Caleb stumbled back, dropping the hammer. He looked at the robot. "What was that?" he asked. Suddenly, the Sentinel's arms moved. They didn't attack him. They simply crossed over its chest, locking into place. The iron staff dropped from its hand and hit the floor. It pierced the concrete, penetrating a hidden socket. Then the house began to groan. It wasn't a sound from the speakers. It was a vibration that Caleb and Nia could feel through the soles of their shoes. It was the sound of massive counterweights dropping inside the walls. It was the sound of chains moving in the darkness behind the plaster. "What did you do?" Nia screamed, scrambling to her feet. The lights in the vault flickered and turned red. Emergency power. Then came the sound of the doors. The main entrance to the vault, the one they had walked through, began to move. But it wasn't just the door swinging shut. A secondary blast shield, a slab of 3-inch tempered steel, dropped from the ceiling like a guillotine blade. Boom! It hit the floor, sealing the exit. Caleb ran to it. He pounded on the steel. "Hey!" he shouted. "Hey, open up!" But the sequence wasn't finished. The ventilation grates in the ceiling slammed shut. Clang, clang, clang. Magnetic seals engaged with a hiss. The false wall they had broken through earlier began to shift. A steel curtain descended, covering the hole, sealing the breach. In 10 seconds, the vault had transformed from a room into a coffin. Caleb looked around wildly. The red emergency lights cast long, terrifying shadows. The air suddenly felt still. Dead. "What is happening?" he yelled. Nia was staring at the walls. She was listening. She heard a low hum. A sound like a vacuum cleaner running in the distance. "The pumps," she whispered. Caleb turned on her. "What pumps?" "The preservation system," Nia said, her voice trembling. "Dad told me about it. If there is a fire or a flood, the room seals itself. It pumps out the oxygen and replaces it with inert nitrogen to stop the fire, to stop the rust." She looked at Caleb with wide, terrified eyes. "It is trying to save the art, Caleb, by killing us." Caleb's face went white. "No, no way. That is illegal. You can't just suck the air out of a room." "It is a vault," Caleb Nia screamed. "It is designed for things not people. We aren't supposed to be here." Caleb looked at the steel door. Panic overtook him. The animal instinct for survival kicked in. He grabbed the diamond-tipped drill, the one he had used to break in hours ago. "Move!" he shouted, pushing Nia aside. He jammed the drill bit against the blast shield. He revved the motor. Screech! The sound was ear-splitting. Sparks showered down, burning his hands, but he didn't stop. He pushed with all his weight. Come on, he screamed. I watched him from my motel room. I took a sip of water. He was drilling into AR-500 steel plate, the kind they use on armored personnel carriers, the kind they use to stop ballistic missiles. He might as well have been trying to scratch a diamond with a toothpick. The drill bit glowed cherry red. Then it began to smoke. Snap. The bit shattered, sending a shard of hot metal flying past Caleb's cheek, cutting a thin line of blood. He dropped the drill. He kicked the door. He threw his body against it, sobbing in frustration. "Let me out," he howled. "Let me out, you crazy old man." He turned to the camera. He found the lens hidden in the clock face. He pressed his face right up to it. "I know you are watching, Winston. Turn it off. Turn off the pumps. We are going to suffocate." I watched him. I checked the environmental readouts on my laptop. Oxygen level 19%, decreasing, nitrogen level rising. They weren't going to die, not yet. The system was designed to lower oxygen slowly to extinguish flames, not to asphyxiate instantly. They had hours, maybe 12 hours before it became critical. But they didn't know that. To them, the air already felt thinner. The panic made them hyperventilate, which used up the oxygen faster. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy of terror. Nia slid down the wall. She pulled her knees to her chest. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was resigning herself to the dark. She looked at the sentinel. The giant robot stood silent, its arms crossed, protecting the empty chest cavity where Caleb thought the gold was. There was no gold inside the sentinel, just a complex system of levers and springs designed for one purpose: defense. I built that robot after my wife died. I built it because I felt vulnerable. I felt like the world could come in and take everything I had left. So I built a guardian. I never thought I would have to use it against my own family. Caleb was pacing now. He was stripping off his shirt. "It is getting hot," he panted. "Why is it getting hot?" It wasn't getting hot. The temperature was dropping, but his brain was playing tricks on him. The nitrogen mix can cause confusion, hallucinations. He looked at the scattered pieces of the broken automata on the floor. "They are looking at me," he whispered, pointing at the head of a silver swan he had decapitated. "Why are they looking at me?" He kicked the silver head across the room. "Stop looking at me," he screamed. Nia looked up. Her movements were sluggish. "Sit down, Caleb," she said softly. "You are using up the air." "I don't want to sit down," Caleb yelled. "I want to leave. I want my money." He ran back to the door. He tried to dig his fingers into the seam of the steel. He broke his fingernails, scratching at the impervious metal. I watched the man who had called me weak. I watched the man who had pushed me down the stairs. He looked small now. The arrogance was gone. The greed was gone. All that was left was a frightened boy trapped in a box he was too stupid to understand. He slumped against the door, sliding down until he hit the floor. He put his head in his hands and began to weep. It wasn't the crying of a repentant man. It was the crying of a bully who had finally met someone he couldn't intimidate. The laws of physics do not care about your ambition, Caleb. Steel is harder than bone, and nitrogen is heavier than hope. I checked the time. It was 4 a.m. The courier with the foundation papers had been ignored. The warning had been burned. The auction had been busted. And now the trap was sealed. I typed a command into my laptop. Enable audio output, Vault Zone 1. I picked up the microphone attached to my headset. I cleared my throat. The speakers in the vault crackled to life. Caleb jumped. Nia looked up, her eyes wide. They heard the sound of a grandfather clock ticking. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Then they heard my voice. "Hello, Caleb," I said. "How is the air down there?" Caleb scrambled to his feet. He looked around wildly, trying to find the source of the voice. "Winston," he screamed. "Winston, open the door. I am sorry. I will give it all back. Just open the door." I leaned into the mic. "I am afraid I can't do that, Caleb," I said. "You broke the toys, and now the toys have put you in timeout." "You are going to kill us," he shrieked. "No," I said, calm and cold. "I am just preserving the collection. And right now you are part of the exhibit." I switched off the mic. I watched them on the screen. 2 rats in a steel cage. The walls were closing in, not physically but psychologically. And up above on the street, the first light of dawn was breaking. The world was waking up. But for Caleb and Nia, the long night was just beginning. The static from the speakers was loud and harsh, scratching against the silence of the sealed vault like sandpaper on steel. I sat in my motel room, adjusting the gain on the microphone. I wanted my voice to be clear. I wanted them to hear every syllable of their sentence. Down in the basement, Caleb was throwing his shoulder against the blast shield, screaming until his throat was raw, while Nia sat huddled in a ball, rocking back and forth. They looked like rats in a bucket waiting for the water to rise. I pressed the button on my laptop. The speakers in the vault crackled to life. Caleb froze mid-scream. He spun around looking at the ceiling, searching for the source of the sound. Testing 1, 2, 3, I said into my headset. "Can you hear me, children?" Winston. Caleb roared, his face twisting into a mask of pure hatred. "Open this door. Open it right now, or I swear to God I will dismantle this place brick by brick." I leaned back in my chair, taking a slow sip of the lukewarm coffee Sasha had brought me hours ago. It tasted bitter, but it helped keep me sharp. "You have already done enough dismantling, Caleb," I said, my voice calm and amplified, echoing off the steel walls of their prison. "You broke the orchestra, you broke the Golden Bird, and then you tried to break the Sentinel. You are a very destructive house guest." "Let us out!" Nia screamed, scrambling to her feet. "Dad, please. We can't breathe. The air is getting heavy. The air is fine." "Nia," I lied. "It is just recycled. It is the guilt that makes it hard to breathe." I watched them on the monitor. Caleb was panting, his chest heaving. He looked wild. The veneer of the sophisticated art dealer was completely gone. "What is this place?" he demanded. "Why did the doors close?" I smiled at the screen. "You triggered the failsafe, Caleb," I explained. "The Sentinel isn't just a statue. It is a pressure sensor. When you struck it with the hammer, the system interpreted it as a structural collapse or a violent intrusion. It initiated the Eternal Museum Protocol." "Eternal Museum?" Caleb repeated the words, sounding foreign in his mouth. "It is a preservation setting," I said. "It is designed to seal the collection in a hermetic environment to protect it from looters, fires, or vandals. The blast shields deploy. The vents close. The humidity is regulated to 0. Nothing comes in, and nothing goes out." "For how long?" Nia whispered. Her face was pale, a ghost in the red emergency light. I checked the readout on my screen. The timer was counting down. "Standard protocol is 48 hours, I said. 48 hours, Caleb shrieked. "We will be dead in 48 hours. We don't have food. We don't have water. We don't have a bathroom." "You should have thought about that before you broke into my house," I said. "Open it," Caleb yelled. "You have the code. You have the controls. Override it." "I can't," I said. And this time I wasn't lying. Not entirely. Once the lockdown is engaged physically, it requires a manual reset from the outside. The hydraulic pins are driven into the concrete. "Even if I wanted to let you out, Caleb, I would need a cutting torch and a team of engineers, and right now I don't feel like hiring anyone." Caleb looked at the door. He kicked it again, a futile gesture of rage. "You set us up," he hissed. "You knew we would try to open the robot. You baited the trap. I didn't bait anything I said. I built a house to protect my things. You are the one who decided to tear it apart." I looked at Nia. She was staring at the speaker, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. She realized then that I wasn't coming to save her. She realized that the father who had fixed her bicycles and paid for her mistakes was gone. "Dad," she sobbed. "Please. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Caleb told me. He told me we would just look. He told me you owed us." "I owe you nothing, Nia," I said, my voice hardening. "I gave you life. I gave you a home. I gave you an education. And you gave me a thief." She flinched as if I had struck her. "I didn't know, Dad," she cried. "I didn't know he was like this." "You didn't look," I countered. "You didn't want to know. You saw the suit, you saw the car, and you stopped asking questions. You let a wolf into the henhouse, Nia, because you liked the way his fur shined. And now you are surprised that he wants to eat the chickens." "I am not a chicken," she whispered. "I am your daughter." "Not right now," I said. "Right now you are an intruder. You are an accomplice to a felony. And you are locked in a box with a man who just lost $5 million. I let that sink in. I watched Caleb. He wasn't looking at the door anymore. He was looking at Nia. He was pacing back and forth, his eyes darting around the room. He was doing the math. The air was limited, the water was non-existent, and his exit strategy had just evaporated. He looked at Nia with a mixture of disgust and blame. "This is your fault," he muttered. Nia stepped back. "What?" "You heard me," Caleb snapped. "You told me he was weak. You told me he was senile. You said the basement was just a workshop. You didn't tell me about the steel doors. You didn't tell me about the traps." I didn't know, Nia pleaded, holding her hands up. You should have known, Caleb screamed. He is your father. You lived here for 20 years. How could you be so stupid? I watched as the predator turned on the prey. It is a law of nature. When the walls close and the alliance breaks. Dad, Nia yelled at the ceiling. Don't leave me with him. He is looking at me like he wants to hurt me. I leaned into the microphone. I told you, Nia, I said. You have to learn to live with your choices. You chose him over me. You chose the quick money over the hard work. Well, now you have him, all to yourself, for 48 hours. But he is dangerous, she cried. I know, I said. That is why I locked the door. I looked at Caleb. He had picked up the sledgehammer again. He wasn't swinging it at the door. He was holding it loosely, tapping it against his leg, staring at Nia. Caleb, I said, my voice sharp, cutting through his rage. He looked up at the speaker. Listen to me closely, I said. There are cameras in every corner, high definition, night vision, audio. Everything you do down there is being recorded to a cloud server. So what, Caleb spat. So I said, if you touch a hair on her head, if you take your frustration out on my daughter, I will make sure the video is played at your sentencing hearing. You are already looking at 20 years for the theft. Don't add a life sentence for assault. Caleb sneered. You think I care about prison, old man? I am going to die in here. You won't die, I said. The system will maintain life support levels. You will be thirsty. You will be hungry. You will be terrified. But you will survive, unless you kill each other. I paused. And frankly, Caleb, looking at you, I think the only person in danger is you. Nia is a Graves. We are survivors. You are just a parasite, and parasites die when the host fights back. Caleb laughed a dry, humorless sound. She fight back. Look at her. She is a mess. Nia straightened up. She wiped her face. She still held the iron arm of the robot in her hand. She gripped it tighter. I am not a mess, she said, her voice shaking but defiant. I am done listening to you, Caleb. Good, I said. I looked at the clock. It was almost dawn. My eyes were burning with fatigue, but I couldn't sleep. Not yet. I have some work to do, I said into the mic. I have to call the insurance company, and the Federal Registry for Historical Artifacts, and the FBI. FBI, Caleb yelled. No, don't call the feds. Winston, wait. Enjoy your stay at the museum, I said. Try not to break anything else. I reached out and flipped the switch on the audio console. Click. The connection died. In the vault, Caleb was screaming at the ceiling, waving the hammer, jumping up to try and reach the speakers. But the sound was gone. He was shouting into a void. I took off my headset and rubbed my ears. The silence in the motel room was heavy. I looked at the screen. Nia had backed into the farthest corner of the room. She sat down, pulling her knees up, creating a barrier. She kept her eyes locked on Caleb. Caleb paced the room like a caged tiger. He kicked a pile of blueprints. He threw a piece of the silver swan against the wall. Then he sat down on the other side of the room. He glared at her. She glared back. The romance was dead. The partnership was dissolved. Now it was just two people who hated each other, trapped in a box of their own making. I picked up my coffee cup. It was cold, but I drank it anyway. I watched them. I remembered when Nia was a baby, I put a gate at the top of the stairs to keep her safe. She used to cry because she wanted to explore. She didn't understand that the gate was love. This steel door was the same thing. I had locked her in to save her. I had to break her trust in Caleb to save her future. It was a harsh lesson, a brutal lesson, but it was the only one that would stick. She would spend the next 2 days staring at the reality of her choices. She would see Caleb not as a dashing boyfriend, but as a sweaty, desperate coward. And when that door finally opened, she would never let a wolf into the henhouse again. I settled back into the chair. I wasn't going anywhere. I was the curator. And this was my most important exhibit. I did not call 911. 911 is for emergencies like heart attacks or house fires. 911 sends a local patrol car with 2 tired officers who just want to finish their shift and go home. They would see a domestic dispute. They would see a daughter fighting with her boyfriend. They would write a report and leave. No. The situation in the basement of the timekeeper required a surgical strike, not a Band-Aid. I picked up my burner phone and dialed a number I had saved years ago. It was the direct line to the art crime team of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is Special Agent Reynolds. I took a breath. I made my voice sound old and frail, but the words were precise. Agent Reynolds, my name is Winston Graves. I am the lifetime custodian of the Graves Foundation for Mechanical Arts. I am calling to report an active crime in progress involving the destruction of federally protected historical assets. I paused. And I believe the perpetrator is Caleb Thorne, a man currently wanted for wire fraud and interstate flight in 3 states. The tone on the other end changed instantly. The boredom vanished, replaced by the sharp click of typing. Caleb Thorne Reynolds repeated, "We have a red notice on him. Are you confirming his location?" "He is currently trapped in the subterranean vault at 424 4th Street, I said. "He has breached the security perimeter. He is armed, and he is destroying priceless artifacts. I have video confirmation. Stay on the line, Mr. Graves. We are rolling." I hung up the phone. I didn't need to stay on the line. I had a front row seat. I watched on my laptop as the world descended on my shop. It wasn't the slow, lazy arrival of the local police from yesterday. This was a swarm. Unmarked black SUVs screeched to a halt at both ends of the alley. Men in tactical gear with FBI emblazoned on their backs poured out. They moved with a fluid, terrifying efficiency. They didn't knock. They didn't ring the bell. They breached the back door with a battering ram that shattered the frame like balsa wood. I switched the camera view to the hallway outside the vault. They flowed down the stairs, a river of black Kevlar and assault rifles. The lead agent held up a hand. They stopped at the blast shield, the massive steel slab I had dropped to seal the room. They tapped it. Solid steel. "Bring up the torch," the agent signaled. Inside the vault, Caleb heard them. He stopped pacing. He looked at the door. "They are here," he whispered. His eyes were wide wild with the nitrogen narcosis and sleeplessness. "It is Sergei. He came back. He brought his hitmen." Nia looked up from the corner. "No, Caleb. That sounds like police." "It is not police," Caleb screamed. He grabbed the switchblade from the floor. He grabbed a shard of glass from the broken display case. He looked like a cornered rat, teeth bared, shaking violently. "It is the Russians," he hissed. "They are going to kill us because I didn't have the papers." He ran to Nia. He grabbed her arm, pulling her up roughly. "Stand up," he ordered. "You are my shield. Get off me," Nia yelled, fighting him. He put the knife to her throat. "Shut up," he snarled. "If they come in shooting you, take the first bullet." I watched this from the motel room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had called the FBI to save her, but in his paranoia, Caleb had turned her into a hostage. On the hallway camera, I saw the sparks fly. The FBI had brought a thermal lance. A jet of blue flame cut into the steel door, melting it like butter. The metal glowed cherry red, then white hot. Molten slag dripped onto the concrete floor, sizzling. Inside the vault, the temperature spiked. The smell of burning metal filled the air, adding to the choking atmosphere. "They are cutting through!" Caleb screamed. He backed away, dragging Nia with him until their backs hit the far wall. He stood right in front of the Sentinel, the giant robot that had started this whole nightmare. "Caleb, please," Nia sobbed. "Put the knife down. It is the FBI. Just surrender. I am not going back to prison," he yelled. "I am not going back to a cage." The torch finished its cut. A perfect rectangle of glowing steel fell inward with a deafening crash. Smoke billowed into the room. "FBI federal agents. Drop the weapon." The voices were loud, amplified, commanding. Through the smoke, red laser dots danced across the room. They swept over the broken automata. They swept over the scattered blueprints. And then they settled on Caleb's chest. 3 bright red dots. Caleb squinted into the haze. He couldn't see the agents. He could only see the dark shapes moving in the doorway. "Stay back!" he screamed, waving the knife. "I have a hostage. I will kill her. I swear I will kill her. Drop the weapon or we will fire," the lead agent shouted. I leaned closer to my screen. "Drop it, Caleb," I whispered. "Don't be a fool." Nia looked at the lasers on his chest. She looked at the knife trembling in his hand. She realized that he was going to get them both killed. She didn't wait for him to decide. She didn't wait for the sniper. She bit him. She sank her teeth into the hand, holding the knife, biting down with all the fury of a woman scorned. Caleb howled. He jerked his hand back. The knife clattered to the floor. Nia threw herself sideways, rolling away from him toward the pile of broken clock parts. Clear. The agents rushed in. It was a blur of motion. Caleb tried to dive for the knife. He was fast, but he wasn't faster than a federal agent. A heavy boot slammed into his chest, pinning him to the floor. "Get off me!" Caleb shrieked, flailing his arms. "My money! My gold!" "Stop resisting!" They flipped him over. His face hit the concrete hard. I saw a tooth fly out. Click, click. The handcuffs went on. Agent Reynolds stepped into the room. He waved the smoke away. He looked around. He saw the devastation. He saw the millions of dollars of destroyed art. He shook his head in disgust. "Secure the scene," he ordered. "This is a crime against history." Two agents hauled Caleb to his feet. He was bleeding from his mouth. His shirt was torn. He looked wild broken. He looked at Nia. "You bitch," he spat. "You set me up. You and your crazy father." Nia didn't look at him. She was sitting on the floor wrapped in a shock blanket that a medic had draped over her shoulders. She was staring at the broken head of the silver swan lying next to her foot. "Get him out of here," Reynolds said. They dragged Caleb toward the door. As he passed the camera, his eyes locked onto the lens. He knew I was watching. "I will get you, Winston," he screamed. "I will get out. I will burn you down." "Keep walking, son," an agent said, shoving him forward. "You are going away for a long time." They let him out. I switched the camera view to the alley. I saw them bring him out into the daylight. A crowd had gathered. Neighbors, tourists, people who used to walk by my shop and wave. They watched as the man who claimed to be the new manager was shoved into the back of an armored van. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing dust and blood. I watched the van drive away. It was done. The parasite had been excised. Inside the vault, Agent Reynolds knelt down beside Nia. "Ms. Graves," he said gently, "are you injured?" Nia shook her head slowly. Physically, she was fine, but inside, I knew she was shattered. "We need to take you in for a statement," Reynolds said. "You aren't under arrest. Your father's report listed you as a coerced party, but we need to know everything." Nia looked up. Her eyes were hollow. "My father," she whispered. "Where is he?" "He is safe," Reynolds said. "He is the one who called us." Nia closed her eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath. "He called the FBI," she said softly. "He didn't come himself." She understood then. She understood the depth of the chasm she had created between us. A father comes to pick you up when you fall off your bike. A witness calls the authorities when you commit a crime. I wasn't her father right now. I was the plaintiff. "Come on, let's get you some air," Reynolds said, helping her up. Nia walked out of the vault. She stepped over the melted steel door. She walked through the ruins of the shop she had tried to steal. She didn't look back. I sat in the motel room. The sun was fully up now. The light was harsh, revealing the stains on the carpet and the cracks in the walls. I closed my laptop. I felt old, tired, but I also felt lighter. The secret was out. The basement was open. The gold was gone or broken. But the cancer was gone too. I packed my bag. I put the laptop in its case. I picked up my cane. I walked to the door of room 12. I took one last look around. This was the place where I had watched my life fall apart and then put it back together. I opened the door and stepped out into the morning. I had a meeting with a lawyer, and then I had a meeting with a contractor. The timekeeper needed new doors, stronger doors, and this time I was going to be the only one with the key. The waiting room of the 4th Precinct smells like stale coffee and bad decisions. It is a smell I have known for years, not from being a criminal, but from being a man who fixes things that other people break. I sat on a hard plastic chair, my cane resting against my knee, watching the clock on the wall. It was a cheap quartz movement ticking loudly, slightly out of rhythm. Even here in the House of Law, time was broken. I had been waiting for 2 hours. The FBI agents had finished their debriefing. They had taken Caleb away in shackles, his threats of revenge echoing down the hallway until the heavy doors cut him off. They had questioned Nia separately. They determined what I already knew, that she was coerced in the end but complicit in the beginning. Because I refused to press charges for the break-in, and because the federal prosecutor was more interested in Caleb's wire fraud ring, they decided to cut her loose. The door opened. Nia walked out. She looked like a ghost. She was wrapped in a gray blanket the police give to victims. Her clothes were covered in dust from the vault. Her hands were blackened with soot from the thermal lance. She looked around the room, wild-eyed, until she saw me. "Dad." She didn't run. She walked toward me slowly, like a child who knows she is in trouble but hopes that being hurt will mitigate the punishment. She stood in front of me shivering. I stood up. My bad leg protested, but I ignored it. I looked at her. I didn't see the greedy woman who had smashed my violin player. I saw the little girl who used to scrape her knees in the driveway. But then I looked closer, and I saw the woman who had burned my warning letter. "I am ready to go home, Dad," she whispered. "I just want to go home. I want to take a shower. I want to forget this ever happened." I looked at her. "Home?" I asked, my voice neutral. "Yes," she said. "To the shop. To my room. We can clean it up, Dad. I will help you. We can hire a crew. We will fix the machines. I promise. I will work every day until it is like new." She reached out to touch my arm. I stepped back. Her hand fell to her side. "There is no home, Nia," I said. She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "Of course there is. The shop, the apartment upstairs." I reached into the inside pocket of my coat. I pulled out a folded document. It wasn't the police report. It was a bill of sale. "While you were in the vault, Nia," I said, "watching you try to sell my life to a Russian smuggler, I made a phone call. I called Arthur. You remember Arthur, my attorney?" Nia nodded slowly, a fresh wave of fear rising in her eyes. "I told Arthur to execute the Doomsday Clause of the Graves Foundation Charter," I said. Nia shook her head. "The Doomsday Clause. It is a provision I wrote 10 years ago," I explained. "It states that if the physical security of the collection is compromised by a family member, the assets are to be liquidated immediately to protect the integrity of the capital." I unfolded the paper. "Yesterday afternoon, while you were screaming at Caleb, I sold it, Nia." She stared at me. You sold the robots." I sold everything," I said. "The robots. The patents. The inventory. And the building." "The building," she gasped. "But that is our house. That is where we live." "That is where I lived," I corrected. "You forfeited your right to live there when you drilled through the lock." Nia looked at the paper. She saw the stamp of the city registrar. She saw the buyer's name, the National Museum of History. "You sold it to a museum," she whispered. "They have been wanting the collection for years," I said. "They offered me $5 million for the lot, the building included. They are going to turn it into a permanent exhibit. The Winston Graves Wing of Horology." Nia was silent for a long moment. I could see the gears turning in her head. Even now, after everything, the greed was still there. It was a reflex. $5 million, she said softly. "Yes," I said. $5 million. She looked up at me. A spark of hope returned to her eyes. "Well, that is good, right? I mean, it is sad about the house, but $5 million, Dad. We can buy a new place, a condo, we can start over. You can retire for real, and I can go back to school. Or I can help you manage the investments." She managed a weak smile. "We are rich, Dad, just like Caleb said. But we don't have to steal it. It is ours legally." I looked at her. I looked at the daughter who thought that burning down the house meant she got to keep the insurance money. I laughed. It was a dry, sad sound. "We," she repeated. "There is no we, Nia," I said, "and there is no money." Her smile faltered. "What do you mean? You just said they paid $5 million. "They did," I said. "But I didn't take a dime." I turned the page of the document showing her the disbursement schedule. Section 4 I read aloud. "In the event of a liquidation, all proceeds are to be transferred directly to the primary beneficiary of the Graves Foundation." "And who is the beneficiary?" Nia asked, her voice trembling. "Is it you?" "No," I said. "I don't need $5 million. I need a motel room and a coffee." I pointed to the line at the bottom. "The Eleanor Graves Scholarship Fund for Underprivileged Engineers." Nia froze. "Mom," she whispered. I nodded. "Your mother always wanted to help kids who like to build things but couldn't afford tools. Kids like Sasha. Kids who have talent but no opportunity." I looked Nia in the eye. "The money was wired this morning, Nia. Every cent. $5 million is currently sitting in an endowment fund that will pay for tuition for hundreds of students for the next 50 years. Nia's mouth fell open. "You gave it away!" she screamed. Her voice echoed in the police station lobby, turning heads. "You gave away $5 million to charity, while your own daughter is standing here with nothing." "I have nothing!" she yelled hysterically, grabbing her hair. "I have no car. Caleb totaled it. I have no apartment. I gave up my lease to move in with him. I have no job, and now I have no home. You did this to me, she spat. You did this to spite me. You are a bitter old miser. I stood there leaning on my cane, letting her rage wash over me. I remembered the day she was born. I remembered holding her and promising to give her the world. I didn't do this to you, Nia, I said, my voice low and hard. I did this for you. For me, she scoffed. You left me homeless. How is that for me? Because I said, stepping closer, my eyes locking onto hers. You need to hit the bottom. You need to feel the concrete. For 28 years, I've been a cushion. Every time you fell, I caught you. Every time you overspent, I wrote a check. Every time you quit a job, I paid your rent. I poked my own chest. I thought I was loving you, I said. But I wasn't. I was crippling you. I was teaching you that consequences were for other people. I was teaching you that money grows on trees, and that fathers are just ATM machines with a heartbeat. Nia was crying now angry, bitter tears. So you punish me, she said, by giving my inheritance to strangers. It wasn't your inheritance, I said sharply. It was my work, my blood, my sweat. You didn't earn a penny of it. I took a deep breath. You called me cheap, Nia. You told Caleb I was a miser. I looked at her dirty clothes, her empty hands, her terrified eyes. I am not stingy, Nia, I said. I am an investor. I invest in gears. I invest in springs. I invest in things that work. I paused, letting the silence stretch between us. And you, Nia, I said, my voice cracking slightly with the weight of the truth. You are a failed investment, she gasped. I put everything I had into you, I said. Love, time, patience, money, and the return on investment was zero. You cheated, you stole, you lied. You brought a wolf into my home because you were too lazy to hunt for yourself. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. So I am cutting my losses, I said. I am writing you off. I turned to walk away. Dad, Nia screamed, running after me. You can't leave me here. I have nowhere to go. I don't have money for a cab. I don't have money for food. I stopped. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a $20 bill. I handed it to her. Here, I said. She looked at the bill with disgust. $20. What am I supposed to do with this? I don't know, I said. Buy a bus ticket. Buy a sandwich. Or buy a newspaper and look at the help wanted ads. I looked at the exit doors. The sun was shining outside. It was a bright, cold day. The museum is sending a team to pack up the shop tomorrow, I said. Don't go back there, Nia. The locks are changed and there are armed guards. If you try to break in again, they won't call me. They will call the prosecutor. But where will you go? She asked, her voice small and frightened. Paris, I said. Paris, she repeated. I have been invited to consult on a restoration at the Louvre, I said. Sasha is coming with me as my apprentice. We leave tonight. Sasha, she whispered. You are taking the assistant. She earned it, I said. She stayed up all night to help me save the collection. She respects the work. I pushed open the heavy glass door. The city noise rushed in. Dad, Nia said one last time. I didn't turn around. Good luck, Nia, I said. I walked out of the station. I walked down the steps to the curb where a taxi was waiting. Sasha was in the back seat waiting with our bags. I got in. I looked out the window. Nia was standing on the sidewalk clutching the gray blanket and the $20 bill. She looked small. She looked alone. She looked like a woman who was finally about to start her life not as a daughter of a rich man, but as a human being who had to survive on her own merits. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, leaving her there. But as the taxi pulled away and merged into traffic, I felt a sense of peace. I hadn't abandoned her. I had liberated her. I had taken away the crutch. Now she would have to learn to walk. Airport, please, I told the driver. He nodded and pulled the meter. The numbers started ticking up. I sat back and watched the city roll by. The audit was complete. The account was closed. And for the first time in 28 years, the balance was zero. The steel bars of the county lockup have a way of stripping a man of his delusions. Caleb Thorne sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the graffiti scratched into the cinder block wall. It had been 24 hours since the FBI dragged him out of the vault. 24 hours since he lost $5 million. 24 hours since he realized that the smartest man in the room was the old watchmaker he had called senile. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that smelled of industrial detergent and other men's sweat. His expensive suit was bagged in evidence. His Italian shoes were replaced by cheap rubber slides. But Caleb wasn't broken yet. He was a con man. And con men always believe they have one last card to play. He stood up and walked to the phone bank in the common area. He had one phone call left. He didn't call a lawyer. He couldn't afford a lawyer. His assets were frozen and his reputation was radioactive. He dialed the only number he knew by heart. He waited. The automated voice announced that this was a collect call from a correctional facility. "Please accept," he whispered, gripping the receiver. "Come on, babe. Pick up." There was a click. The line opened. "Hello?" It was Nia. Her voice sounded thin, distant. Nia. Caleb breathed out. "Thank God. Listen to me, babe. Do not hang up. I need you to focus. I am in the holding tank at the federal courthouse. The arraignment is in an hour." He looked around to make sure no other inmates were listening. "I need bail money, Nia. The judge is going to set it high because of the flight risk. You need to get cash." Silence on the other end. "Nia, are you there?" Caleb asked, his panic rising. "I am here, Caleb," she said. Her voice was cold, colder than the liquid nitrogen in the vault. "Did you hear me?" Caleb hissed. "I need bail. Go to the apartment. Look in the vent in the bathroom. I taped a stash there. It is not much, maybe $5 grand, but it is enough to pay a bondsman." "There is no stash," Caleb. Nia said flatly. "The landlord evicted us this morning. He found the drugs you hid in the bedroom. He kept the deposit, and he threw everything else in the dumpster." Caleb gripped the phone tighter. The drugs. He had forgotten about the small bag of cocaine he kept for recreational use. "Okay, forget the apartment," he stammered. "The ring, the diamond ring I gave you, it is worth 10 grand. Pawn it." "I don't have the ring," Nia said. "I threw it at you, remember? The police have it. It is evidence." Caleb slammed his hand against the wall. "Then steal something," he screamed, losing control. "Beg your father. I don't care what you do, Nia, just get me out of here. You owe me. I did this for us." "For us?" Nia laughed. It was a dry, broken sound. "You did this for you, Caleb. You locked me in a vault. You held a knife to my throat. You told me you would kill me if the FBI came in." "That was just talk," Caleb said quickly, trying to pivot back to his charm. "I was stressed, babe. It was the nitrogen. I wasn't thinking straight. I love you, Nia. You know I love you. We are a team. Bonnie and Clyde, right?" There was a long pause on the line. Then I heard the sound of a notification ping on Nia's end. "I just got an email," Nia said softly. "What?" Caleb asked. "Who cares about email?" "It is from my father," she said. Caleb froze. "Winston. He sent me a file," Nia continued. "He said it is a going-away present. He said I might need it for my statement to the prosecutor." "What is in the file?" Caleb asked, his stomach dropping. "It is a video clip," Nia said. "From the basement cameras." Caleb felt the blood drain from his face. "It is the clip from last night," Nia said, describing it with brutal clarity. "It shows you smashing the silver violinist. It shows you screaming about the money. And then, it shows you grabbing me by the hair. It shows you throwing me against the wall. It shows you holding the knife." Caleb couldn't breathe. "Delete it," he whispered. "Nia, delete it right now." "I can't delete it," she said. "Dad didn't just send it to me. He carbon-copied Agent Reynolds." "No," Caleb gasped. "I watched it, Caleb," she said. "I watched how you looked at me. You didn't look at me like a partner. You looked at me like a human shield." "Nia, please," Caleb begged, tears of desperation welling up. "If they have that video, they will add assault charges. They will add kidnapping. That is 20 years, Nia. You are sentencing me to death." Nia didn't answer immediately. I could hear her breathing on the other end. She was standing on a street corner somewhere, holding a phone that was her only lifeline. She had $20 in her pocket and no home, but she had her dignity back. "You sentenced yourself, Caleb," she said. "You broke the bird, you broke the trust, and you broke me. Nia, don't do this." "Goodbye, Caleb," she said. Click. The line went dead. Caleb stood there holding the receiver, listening to the dial tone. It was the sound of his life flatlining. He dropped the phone. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. 2 hours later, he stood before a federal judge. It was a massacre. The prosecutor didn't just have the video. He had the dossier from the safe. He had the charred remains of the foundation letter. He had the testimony of Agent Reynolds, and he had the statement from Nia Graves. The charges were read out like a grocery list of failures: wire fraud, grand larceny, interstate flight to avoid prosecution, destruction of cultural heritage property, assault with a deadly weapon, reckless endangerment. Caleb stood in his orange jumpsuit looking small and pathetic. His public defender, a tired woman with too many cases, tried to argue for leniency. She talked about his difficult childhood. She talked about the stress of the moment. The judge wasn't listening. He was looking at the photos of the smashed automata. He was looking at the bruised face of Nia Graves in the evidence file. "Mr. Thorne," the judge said, peering over his glasses, "you didn't just steal property. You destroyed history. You took things of beauty and reduced them to scrap metal because you were too ignorant to understand their value. And then you turned on the people who tried to help you." The gavel banged. "I am setting bail at $5 million cash," the judge announced. Caleb looked up. $5 million. It was the exact number he had tried to steal. The irony was a punch to the gut. He was remanded to custody pending trial. But everyone knew there would be no trial. With that much evidence, he would plead out. He would be lucky to see the sun before he was 55. They took him to the federal detention center. They processed him. They gave him a number. He was walked into the general population block. It was a loud, terrifying place. Men with tattoos on their faces and muscles like coiled steel looked him up and down. Caleb tried to walk tall. He tried to put on the swagger he used to wear with his Italian suits. He puffed out his chest. "Fresh meat," a voice called out. Caleb ignored it. He found an empty table in the chow hall and sat down. He stared at the gray meatloaf on his tray. A large man sat down opposite him. He had a scar running from his ear to his chin. "You are the guy, right?" the man asked. Caleb looked up. He tried to look tough. "Yeah, I am the guy. I took down a museum. $5 million score." The man laughed. It wasn't a respectful laugh. It was a mocking laugh. $5 million, the man said loud enough for the other tables to hear. "That is not what I heard. I heard you got taken down by a toy maker." Caleb stiffened. "Who told you that?" "It is on the news, kid," the man said. "CNN. They are calling it the clockwork capture. They showed the video of you getting locked in by a robot." The cafeteria went quiet. Other inmates turned to listen. "A robot," another inmate shouted. "You got beat by a doll." "No." Caleb shouted, standing up. It was a security system. High tech, military grade. The man with the scar stood up too. He poked Caleb in the chest. "I heard you cried like a baby," the man said, grinning. "I heard the old man talk to you over the speaker and made you sit in time out." Laughter erupted in the room. It was brutal, humiliating laughter. "Toy boy," someone chanted. "Toy boy. Toy boy." The chant picked up rhythm. Inmates were banging their cups on the tables. Caleb looked around. He saw the contempt in their eyes. In prison, you get respect for robbing banks or fighting cops. You don't get respect for getting outsmarted by a 71-year-old man with a cane. He was a joke, a punchline. He sank back into his seat. He covered his ears, but he couldn't block it out. Toy boy. He closed his eyes and saw the golden bird. He saw the moment he twisted the key too hard. He saw the moment his greed snapped the mainspring. He realized then that Winston Graves hadn't just put him in prison. He had destroyed his name. He had turned him into a cautionary tale. Caleb Thorne, the man who thought he was a king, was now just the jester in a court of thieves. He looked down at his tray. A single green pea rolled off his fork and fell onto the table. It looked like a tiny emerald. He reached for it, but his hand was shaking so bad he couldn't pick it up. He put his head on the table and let the darkness take him. The auction was over, and he had been sold for parts. The rain in this city always smells different depending on where you are standing. When I was a young man standing outside the factory gates, it smelled like iron and opportunity. When I built the timekeeper, it smelled like mahogany and success. But today, as I stood in the center of my empty apartment, packing the last of my life into 2 leather suitcases, the rain smelled like a clean slate. It washed away the dust of the last 40 years. It washed away the memories of the shouting and the crying and the betrayal. I folded a crisp white shirt and placed it into the trunk. Beside me, Sasha was wrapping my precision tools in velvet cloths. She moved with the grace of a surgeon. She didn't slam things. She didn't rush. She treated every caliper and every loop with reverence. "Winston," she said, checking her list. "The car will be here in an hour. Are you sure you have everything?" I looked around the room. The walls were bare. The outline of pictures I had taken down left ghostly squares on the wallpaper. "I have everything I need, Sasha," I said. "The rest is just noise." Then there was a knock on the door. It wasn't the police. It wasn't a courier. It was a hesitant knock. A knock that didn't want to be heard but needed to be answered. I knew who it was. A father always knows the sound of his child's hesitation. I walked to the door. My bad leg was aching from the damp weather, but I stood tall. I opened it. Nia stood in the hallway. I hadn't seen her in 3 weeks. Not since I left her at the police station with $20 and a hard truth. She looked different. The designer clothes were gone. She was wearing a faded denim jacket and black pants that were slightly too short. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, not a stylist's creation, but a worker's necessity. But it was her hands that caught my eye. They were red, chapped. There was a small bandage on her thumb and a burn mark on her wrist. She smelled of old fryer grease and cheap coffee. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. I didn't invite her in immediately. I stood in the doorway, the gatekeeper of my own peace. "Hello, Nia," I said. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Just for a minute. I heard you were leaving today." I stepped aside. She walked into the apartment. She looked at the boxes. She looked at the suitcases with the airline tags already attached. Paris, Charles de Gaulle. She looked at Sasha, who was standing by the table holding a compass. Sasha nodded to her politely but didn't speak. It wasn't a nod of superiority. It was just an acknowledgement. But I saw Nia flinch. She saw the girl who had taken the place she refused to fill. "You are really going," Nia said, looking back at me. "To France." "Yes," I said. "The Louvre has a collection of 18th century automata that have stopped singing. They need someone to teach them the tune again." Nia nodded. She looked down at her shoes. They were cheap sneakers worn at the heel. "I got a job," she said quietly. "Oh." "At a diner on 6th Street, she said. "The early shift. I wait tables. I scrub the counters. It is hard work, Dad. My feet hurt every day. My back hurts. I get yelled at by customers who think the coffee is too cold or the eggs are too runny." She looked up at me. Her eyes were swimming with tears. "I never knew," she said. "I never knew how much it hurt to earn $10. I leaned against the wall. "It is an education, Nia," I said. "It is the education I tried to give you for free, but you insisted on paying the full tuition." She wiped her eyes with her rough hand. "I am sorry, Dad," she sobbed. "I know I said it before in the vault when I was scared, but I am saying it now because I am tired. I am so sorry. I miss you. I miss my home. I sleep in a room with 3 other girls. It is loud and it smells. I miss us." She took a step forward. "Can you forgive me?" she asked. "Can we start over?" "I don't want the money, Dad. I don't care about the foundation or the millions. I just want my father back." I looked at her. I looked at the burn on her wrist. It was a badge of honor whether she knew it or not. But forgiveness is a tricky mechanism. If you give it too freely, it loses its value. If you give it too late, it rusts. I walked over to her. I placed my hand on her shoulder. "I forgive you, Nia," I said softly. She let out a sob and tried to hug me, but I held her back. "I forgive you," I repeated. "But forgiveness does not mean restoration. You burned the bridge, Nia. We can build a new one, but you cannot walk across the ashes of the old one and pretend it is still standing." She pulled back, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means I am getting on that plane," I said. "I am going to Paris. I am going to live the rest of my life doing what I love with people who respect the craft." "But what about me?" she cried. "You are leaving me here. I am a waitress, Dad. I can barely pay rent. I know," I said. I walked over to the table where my travel bag sat. Next to it was a small wooden box. It wasn't ebony. It wasn't inlaid with gold. It was simple pine scratched and stained with oil. I picked it up. I walked back to Nia and held it out to her. She looked at it. "Is this money?" she asked, hope flickering in her eyes. "No," I said. "It is better than money." She took the box. It was heavy. She opened the latch. Inside was a mess of gears, springs, screws, and a brass faceplate that was tarnished black. It was a clock, a very old, very broken clock, and nestled next to it were 3 tools, a screwdriver, a pair of tweezers, and a small file. "What is this?" she asked, staring at the junk. "That I said is a 19th century carriage clock. It hasn't run in 50 years. The mainspring is seized, the escapement is bent, and the balance wheel is out of alignment." I pointed to the tools. "And those are the tools I started with." Nia looked up at me baffled. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because you asked for a start," I said. I looked her dead in the eye. "You want money, Nia. You want a life. You want to be part of the family again." I pointed at the box in her hands. "Fix it. Fix. Fix the clock," she repeated. "Yes," I said. "Not with magic, not with a check, with your hands. Figure out why it stopped. Learn the patience it takes to file a gear tooth by tooth until it fits. Learn the frustration of a spring that flies across the room when you are almost done." But I don't know how she protested. "I am not a mechanic." "You are a Graves," I said sternly. "It is in your blood. You just never bothered to use it because you were too busy looking for shortcuts." I checked my watch. "The car would be here in 10 minutes. If you can make that clock tick," I said, "if you can bring it to me running, keeping perfect time, then we will talk. Then I will know that you aren't just sorry. I will know that you are capable of building something instead of just destroying it." "And if I can't?" she whispered, looking at the daunting pile of metal. "Then you stay a waitress," I said. "And you learn to be the best waitress in the city. There is no shame in honest work, Nia. There is only shame in wasted potential." I turned away from her. I walked to my suitcases. Sasha picked up her bag. She looked at Nia, then she looked at me. She smiled. She knew what I was doing. She knew that this was the ultimate test. "Let's go, Sasha," I said. "Paris is waiting." We walked out the door. Nia stood in the center of the empty apartment holding the box of broken parts. She looked terrified. She looked overwhelmed. But she didn't drop the box. I walked down the stairs, my cane tapping a rhythm on the wood. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. If I looked back, I might cave. I might write her a check. I might rob her of the lesson one last time. We stepped out onto the sidewalk. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds. A black town car was waiting at the curb. The driver opened the trunk. I got in. As the car pulled away, I looked up at the window of the apartment. I saw a silhouette standing there. She was looking down at the street. She was still holding the box. I sat back in the leather seat. I closed my eyes. I had given her a broken clock. But in reality, I had given her time. I had given her the chance to understand that a life isn't something you inherit. It is something you assemble piece by piece with your own hands. And if she fixed it, if she walked into my workshop in Paris one day with that clock ticking in her hand, then she wouldn't be Nia the thief. She wouldn't be Nia the waitress. She would be Nia the watchmaker. And that would be a title worth more than $5 million. I watched the city fade into the distance. The audit was over. The account was closed. But the workshop remained open for those who were willing to do the work. Paris sounds different than the city I left behind. The rain here hits the cobblestones with a gentle rhythm, like a metronome set to a slow adagio. I am standing on the stage of the Grand Palais under a dome of glass and steel that reminds me of the inner workings of a giant pocket watch. The lights are warm. The audience is silent, waiting for my next word. I'm wearing a tuxedo that fits perfectly tailored by a man who understands that a craftsman needs room in the shoulders to move. I look out at the crowd. There are historians from the Louvre. There are collectors from Switzerland. And in the front row, sitting with a notebook on her lap, is Sasha. She is wearing a pin on her lapel. It is the golden bird restored and singing. It doesn't belong to a thief anymore. It belongs to the world. And Sasha is its guardian. I clear my throat. The art of the automaton. I say into the microphone, my voice amplified through the hall, is not about imitating life. It is about understanding the mechanics of the soul. A machine only works if every gear respects its neighbor. If one wheel spins too fast, it strips the teeth of the next. If one spring is too tight, it snaps the axle. Balance is not a luxury, it is a necessity. The audience applauds. They think I am talking about brass and steel. They do not know I am talking about flesh and blood. 4,000 miles away, the sun is setting over a cramped basement apartment in Chicago. The radiator hisses a song of neglect. The air smells of boiled cabbage and old dust. Sitting at a wobbly card table under the harsh glare of a 60-watt bulb is a woman. Nia does not look like the girl who drank champagne in my vault. Her designer dress is gone, replaced by a flannel shirt stained with machine oil. Her hair is pulled back in a messy knot, loose strands falling into her eyes. Her hands, the hands that once held a diamond drill, are rough. The fingernails are cut short and rimmed with grease. She is holding a pair of tweezers. In front of her, laid out on a clean rag, are the guts of the 19th century carriage clock I gave her. I can see her in my mind's eye as clearly as if I were standing there. I know the frustration she is feeling. She is trying to seat the escapement wheel. It is a delicate operation. If your hand shakes by a millimeter, the pivot misses the jewel. She tries. Her hand slips. The wheel falls over. "Damn it," she whispers. She rubs her eyes. She is tired. She has just finished an 8-hour shift at the diner, carrying heavy trays on aching feet. She wants to quit. She wants to turn on the TV and forget. The old Nia would have thrown the clock across the room. The old Nia would have called a boyfriend to fix it. The old Nia would have blamed the tool. But the old Nia is gone. She died in the nitrogen atmosphere of the vault. This new woman takes a deep breath. She picks up the tweezers again. She leans in. She focuses. This is the calibration I was waiting for. For 28 years, I was the mainspring of her life. I provided the energy. I pushed her forward. But a clock cannot run on the mainspring alone. It needs a regulator. It needs friction to control the release of power. By cutting her off, I gave her friction. By taking away the money, I forced her to engage her own gears. Back in Paris, I stepped down from the podium. A man approaches me. He is a curator from Vienna. "Mr. Graves," he says, shaking my hand, "your restoration of the Sentinel is a miracle. How did you know to replace the iron chest plate with titanium?" "Because I said," smiling softly, "iron rusts when it is exposed to tears. Titanium endures." I walk to the back of the hall. I pull my pocket watch from my vest. It is an old piece, a fusee movement from London. I click it open. Inside the cover is a photograph. It is faded now. It shows a young man with soot on his face holding a baby girl in a pink blanket. Tiana is standing next to us, laughing. I look at the baby in the picture. I loved her so much it hurt. I loved her enough to ruin her. And then I loved her enough to break her. I look back at the mental image of the basement in Chicago. Nia holds her breath. She guides the pivot into the hole. Click. It seats. She lets out a sigh. She picks up the winding key. It is the same motion Caleb used to destroy the bird, but her hand is gentle. She turns it. 1 click. 2 clicks. She nudges the balance wheel. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The sound is faint, like a heartbeat returning after a long trauma. Nia sits back. A smile spreads across her face. It is not the greedy grin of a lottery winner. It is the tired, proud smile of a creator. She has fixed something. She has taken a broken, chaotic mess and brought it to order. She picks up her phone. She looks at my number. She hesitates. She wants to call me. She wants to say, "Dad, I did it. Send the plane ticket." But she doesn't. She puts the phone down. She looks at the clock. She realizes that the satisfaction she feels isn't from my approval. It is from her own competence. She realizes that she doesn't need to be saved anymore. She picks up the next gear. She keeps working. I close my pocket watch. I have not lost a daughter. I have found an apprentice. She is just studying at a different campus right now. The campus of Hard Knocks. Sasha walks up to me, handing me a glass of champagne. "To the future, Winston," she says. I raise my glass. "To the mechanism," I say. I take a sip. The champagne is cold and dry. I look out the window at the lights of Paris. The Eiffel Tower is sparkling, a giant iron needle stitching the sky to the earth. I am 72 years old. My hip still hurts when it rains. I am alone in a foreign city. But I have never been more at peace. I audited my life. I looked at the liabilities. Caleb is in a cell staring at a wall. The stolen money is educating a new generation of engineers. And Nia is finally learning that time is the only currency that matters, and you cannot steal it, you have to make it count. The gears turn. The spring unwinds. The hands move forward. I am Winston Graves. I am a clockmaker. And for the first time in a long time, every clock in my life is telling the right time. We spend our lives building castles for our children, hoping they will inherit our kingdom. But sometimes in our desire to give, we forget to teach them how to build. I hid my treasure in the basement, not to hoard it, but to protect it from hands that hadn't learned the value of work. Greed is a rust that corrodes even the strongest steel. If you raise a child to love the fruit but hate the tree, don't be surprised when they chop it down for firewood. True inheritance isn't what you leave in a bank account. It is the character you forge when the vault is empty. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder about the value of hard work. And if you want more stories about justice and family secrets, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let me know in the comments. Would you have forgiven Nia, or did Winston make the right call? I read every single one. Until next time, keep your gears turning and watch your blind spots.